What's good, Ivy Nation? Welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Trevor. That's Brian. I'm Vince, and we are here. We're here to entertain. Just let us entertain you. That's what we're here for, and we're excited about it. And we got a good show in store for you today. We've got defensive tackles to talk about, and then the last part of the show is we are going to talk running backs, and that would be running backs around the country, not specifically at Notre Dame, and the guys are going to rank their top running backs in the country, top running back rooms in the country. So all kinds of fun stuff in store for that show right there. Gentlemen, I got to ask, just because it's been a thing lately, how's the weather where you are? Are we looking at any outages anytime soon?
Yeah.
Are we good?
Well, I don't know. Trev had perfect weather yesterday, and it went out. So, Vince, as far as I know, weather's going to be good, but we're going to try to have a clean day. I'm going to be honest, man. Like, I'm excited to talk about the D tackles, but I'm really looking forward to this running back conversation. But it's going to be two really interesting topics and two topics I'm excited about today, man. It's like I thought about like pairing when we talk about the running backs, we do the running back rooms, but I was like, that'll just be a lot of running back talk. So I decided to kind of mix it up a little bit, and it's going to be a fun conversation. Here's what I want to know. I would love to hear during the chat when we're making predictions. I want to hear your guys' predictions. And then also, I'm going to warn you guys in advance. One thing I'm going to want to hear from you in the chat today, with those that are watching live, is I want to hear who are your top 5 backs? What is your top 10 running back rooms? Like, if we don't have somebody, why should we have somebody else? That's part of the fun. That's why I like you guys to stay on point during the show, because it helps us kind of engage, as opposed to I look over and it's like somebody's talking about something that's nothing to do with the show today. But it really does make for a better show, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts, because Trev and I we've had a long conversations tonight talking about the running back rooms and where we rank different groups. So that's part of the fun, is hearing what you guys think. And if you're listening and it's not live, that's what the comment section is for. That's what the chat is for. You can go ahead and leave a comment. Let us know who your running back rooms are, because if you have a strong enough opinion that somebody should or should not be in the ranking, then have a strong enough conviction to put your ranking in there. And that's what makes this fun. And then we can go back and look and be like, man, I nailed that one. Or what was I thinking putting that group in the top 5? Or why did we not have that group in the top 10? And that was more of the conversation for us, Trev, was there were some rooms that were like, I don't know, man. But the D tackle stuff at Notre Dame, though, guys, has got to come first, because this is going to be a very big year, Trev, a very big year for the unit and for the position coach. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's big shoes to fill, literally and figuratively, when it comes to the interior of the defensive line. I mean, you're losing somebody in Riley Mills, who led your team in pressures, sacks, and I believe tackles for a loss last season. It's a lot of production. Marcus Freeman has mentioned in multiple interviews that, hey, look, you can't replace a Riley Mills, you can't replace a Howard Cross with just 2 people. You're not replacing 2 with 2. You have to replace the production. How do you do that? And this season, we've said it all offseason that it's going to start coming at you in waves. Ideally, just looking at the makeup of the room, it will be a group effort to replace their combined, let's see, what was it? A combined 14 tackles for a loss, 11.5 sacks, 64 tackles, 56 total pressures. And then Mills led the way with a team leading 34 pressures, 8.5 tackles for a loss, and 7.5 sacks. So there are big shoes to fill, especially in bigger moments. I mean, look, down the stretch before he got injured, Riley Mills was playing his best football in the blue and gold. And there are some big shoes to fill between all the gentlemen that we're going to be talking about today. But I think one thing that the chat and listeners on the podcast will take away is that they have the people in the room to do it. This isn't a scenario of, well, they just have a laundry list of 6 or 7 guys that have to play above their God-given ability in order to replace that level of production. But there is also still that aspect of still got to see it, because there are some question marks at the top of the room that need to be addressed. But I'm excited to talk about this today, man.
It's one of those rooms, Vince, that there's a lot to be excited about with this room, but then also a lot of question marks. And that is sort of, I mean, it's true for every team in the country, but there are certainly some positions on this football team where, like, look, we kind of have a good idea of what's going to happen at running back. We have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen at linebacker and corner. And there's certain positions that we can say with certainty the range is going to like be somewhere here. And then there's other positions like maybe wide receiver, although I'm kind of confident on wide receiver is going to be in a certain range. The question is, can they get to the top of that range? But like with the D-line, it's similar to the DN conversation. Like it could be right here, but right now it's right here, and we don't know where it's going to get to because of all the question marks. I actually have less question marks about the D tackles as far as a floor standpoint than I do the ends. Where my questions come with this defensive tackle group, Vince, is what's the ceiling going to be? And the floor is going to be solid because we kind of saw it against Georgia, Penn State, and Ohio State. We saw these guys basically have to play together, and we saw Howard Cross playing kind of on one leg a little bit, and you're basically losing Howard Cross, replacing him with Jared Dawson, and that's what your room is, and hopefully an Armel Mukum. But you kind of saw the floor in the playoff last year, guys. It was good enough to beat Georgia. It was good enough to beat Penn State. Wasn't good enough to beat Ohio State. Can they raise their level of play? That's really the big question. I'm not worried about like the D tackles not being solid. Like I think we've seen enough of Gabriel Rubio over the years and Jared Dawson over the years and Donovan Hinish. If Donovan Hinish hasn't answered your questions about whether or not he can play at a place like Notre Dame and play at a pretty high level, then you've got to just thing where nope, I can't like it because he's only 277. I need a 2.8 at least on there. That's fine. I think most people recognize that Donovan Hinish is a good football player. Is he an elite football player? That's where you could have some debate about whether he can get there, but he was a good football player for Notre Dame last year. We've seen what Jared Dawson can do the last 3 years as a D tackle in the ACC. So the floor I'm actually good with here, where I want to see, okay, can this unit be a driver of an elite defense as opposed to just riding a sidecar? You know what I mean? Like, and right now the D tackles are going to be riding a sidecar based on what we know. The question is, can they become a driver? And if they can, this defense is going to be nasty because I believe an elite defense needs to be great up the middle. And you better be really good at other spots if you're not going to be elite up the middle. And I think for the most part last year, Notre Dame was elite up the middle in certain areas. And in some ways they weren't. Run defense, which we'll talk about. But, I mean, when they were right, like there was that stretch from like Louisville till Indiana where Riley Mills is just an animal. And, you lost Onye and then you get back Rubio. He was solid. Cross goes down. Donovan Hinish steps up. Like, you were good there. Now it's like, okay, what's the consistency, but what's the ceiling? Well, we know what the ceiling could be, but can they get to that ceiling? And what ultimately is the actual ceiling? I think that's the bigger question for me. And what a lot of this conversation is going to be geared towards as we dive into the tight ends. The defense. I see you got Trev. You got me thinking about tight ends all the time.
I think with everything that you just said, those are all key points to what this season is going to be. But I think a lot of it hinges on, I think this is a good place to talk about it. I think a lot of it hinges on Al Washington and what he's going to be able to do with this group, right? I mean, Al Washington is one of the most controversial coaches on this staff, right? I mean, he has gone from the doghouse to, the penthouse and anywhere in between, depending on who you talk to and when. And I know there's recruiting involved, there's coaching involved, there's all of these different things, but this is going to be a big year, I think, for Al Washington because of all the things that you said. I don't know, and this is something we're obviously going to talk about. I don't know if there's that frontline guy in this group that we're going to talk about today. So he's got to get all these guys ready to go. And what does that look like, Trev?
Yeah, when I think back about our conversation around the defensive ends, there's a lot of parallels here. We talk about the floor, and we're pretty confident where the floor is, but the ceiling is going to be dictated by a lot of people we didn't see either in a Notre Dame uniform or that just weren't a big part of the postseason. For the defensive end room, we talked a lot about Josh Burnham and Tui Alamaka. If that was your two starting defensive ends and you knew they were going to basically play 75% of the snaps going into the season, it's like, okay, let's roll. These are two really good football players with room to get better. I think when you look at the interior defensive line, you can have a similar conversation with Gabe Rubio and Donovan Hinish. We did get to see what they did against Georgia and against Penn State and Ohio State. And I think you can look at that and say, well, hold on, this is a pretty decent group of guys. Good experience. They still have room to improve, but not enough. Like, their improvement won't set this group from great to elite. They will just have a really good floor to this defensive tackle room. But then you start thinking about the guys we didn't see in the postseason. The Armel Mukums, the Jason Onyes, Jared Dawson wasn't on the team. Elijah Hughes wasn't on the team. Other players that just might not have had as big of a role or none in the postseason. And that is that group that can take this room over the top. Their development is what's going to take this room over the top from being good to elite. And when you start looking at this room as a whole, I think it's a good time to bring up the overall depth chart of what all this is broken down about. Go ahead, Brian.
I actually want to finish up kind of some thoughts on Al Washington first, because I do think this is a big year for him.
Yeah.
And maybe not in the way that some people think, because I don't know that it's a big year like, oh, he's got to prove to me he's a good football coach. I think he did that last year. When you consider all the personnel losses, you see the jump in improvement they had last season. They went from 6.5 sacks from the D tackles in 2023 to 18.5 last year. If you take the sacks per game from the D tackles and put that in a 13-game season like the 2023 team had, it's 15.5 tackles or sacks. So, like, I know it can look even more of a big jump because one year you played 13 games, the next year you played 16 games. But on average, that would have resulted in 15.5 sacks. And the 3 years prior, they had 6.5 sacks from the D tackles, 10.5 sacks in 2022, 11.5 sacks in 2021. And then you would have gone basically 15.5. And I actually would be curious what I should have done. The research I should have done is what were their numbers post Indiana, like before you went and played Georgia and those positions. Because, you'd have got one from, I know Donovan Heinisch had one against Georgia, but I don't know that they had any other D tackle sacks in those next 3 games. So the point is like you saw a jump from the D tackle room last year. And now run game production, you only had 4 tackles for loss from the D tackles there. But the overall level of play, when you consider that your preseason All-American did not come close to playing like one, Riley Mills raised his game. Onye raised his game before he was out. Rubio came back and played solid football. Donovan Heinisch had the best season of his career. And your defensive line coach was able to overcome a lot of those injuries and get this group to play pretty darn good football for the final 2/3 of the season. And I think that says a lot to be able to rally that room after what was a rough start, because I don't think Mills or Cross played all that well in the first few games of the year, especially Howard Cross. So I think Al Washington has kind of proven he's a good football coach. I think the last couple of years, the recruiting has certainly been better. But there's a lot of people that had that initial impression of him on the recruiting trail in the first year as the D-line coach, when the defense as a whole just wasn't that great. And they've never gotten over that. This is the year where those people have a chance to finally come around if he can get the most out of this group. Because I would argue, when you talk about the depth chart preview, Trev, as we transition into that, a lot of stuff that happened last year wrong, this is another position where that's going to benefit this football team. Donovan Heinisch being thrust into bro, we can't have you as a rotation guy anymore. We need you to step up and be a dude. And Donnie Heinisch was like, gotcha, bet. And I'm going to go do that. I would argue that the best nose tackle play we saw all season from Notre Dame started when Donovan Heinisch was given a more prominent role at the position. And I think also Al Washington and Al Golden did a great job of using him better, because one of the complaints we had in September was, why are they asking Donovan Heinisch to play like he's 300 pounds? You guys remember that? Like, he was getting kind of pushed around a little bit, and you're like, why are you asking this kid to come up and anchor? Well, after that, they started saying, okay, let's use this kid to attack. And he was very productive and a very effective player. So I think Al Washington's done a really good job. And if he can take advantage of the things that happened last year, the experience, the talent that they have at the position, and I think it is good talent in the size, I think he's going to finally be able to kind of get some of those remaining doubters a little bit off his back. And if they underachieve, then obviously those questions get louder. But if last year's any indication, guys, I'm very excited to see what we're going to do, because you started to see, like, Riley Mills, year 3 under Al Washington, game took off. Donovan Heinisch, year 3 under Al Washington, game took off. You saw improvement from Josh Burnham last year, Junior Tuilamaka last year. As these guys have played more years for Al Washington, their games improve. Well, now Armel Mookum's going into his 3rd year. Some of these other guys are going into year 4. Some of these other guys are, going into year 3. Josh Burnham and Junior Tuilamaka going into year 3 permanently under him. And then obviously Boubacar is going into year 3 under him. So you're now in a situation where, okay, he's the one that's influenced this room. There's no, well, they're doing this because of Mike Elston or whatever. And that's not a shot at Mike Elston. It's just whenever you're in year one and Isaiah Foskey goes out and has 11.5 sacks, it's like, well, yeah, Mike Elston coached that guy up. These are his guys now. And if the pass is any indication, with the exception of Howard Cross, we've seen guys under Al Washington just steadily get better every year, with one exception. And when it's one exception, it's not the coach that is the reason for that exception. And that's what kind of has me fired up about this room, is because we can wish all we want that something's going to happen a certain way, guys. But if there's no track record of it, then the odds of it actually happening are like not great. I think what we've seen under Al Washington and the job he's done as a position coach is, look, guys just keep getting better and better and better and better. As long as they have the right attitude, they're going to keep getting better and better and better. And now we got guys going into year 3 and 4 of playing under him. Bryce Young's going into year 2, but everybody else is kind of year 3 and 4. And you start getting a little bit fired up about it, especially the interior guys. And then you throw in a couple veteran, or like one veteran and Jared Dawson. And it's like, okay, because let's be honest, RJ Oben was the anomaly when it comes to transfers being effective under Al Washington. Even a guy like Chris Smith was way better at Notre Dame than I thought he was going to be. And then obviously we know what Javonte Jean-Baptiste did the year before. So I'm excited to see what this group is. But this is a big year for Al Washington to finally get people to recognize, like, hey, this guy's pretty good football coach. And, or it just the people that have criticisms of him it'll be amplified because the unit doesn't play well.
As we transition to the depth chart, Brian, I do want to kind of throw a curveball here at you. Anybody who's coached football before or follows football, from an X's and O's standpoint, is used to like the 1 technique and the 3 technique and those being kind of different body types and those being different things. And I know our depth chart just says D tackle, right? Can you explain the differences between maybe that old school way of looking at things and maybe the way Notre Dame looks at things, or is there a difference at all?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Is.
I just want
to
put that out there.
Well, I don't know if I'd say it's new school. It's the way Notre Dame has done it. I'm curious to see if it remains that way under Chris Ash. But in the past, your nose tackle's your big guy. He's the space eater. He's a 2-gap guy. You want him having to hey, we want you to double team this guy. You have to double team this guy, even in 4-down units. So obviously in the old school odd fronts, that's literally all he would do for large chunks of games. Yes. But the way that Notre Dame uses their defensive line is they can use a big guy, but they like their nose tackles to be guys that are movement guys. So, Howard Cross would line up over the center, but he didn't just kind of come off and just take on 2 blockers. They slant a lot. They 2 twists. He shoots gaps. They want him getting upfield as quickly as possible. That's why he's been effective in that role and why Donovan Hines was effective in that role. When they sit there and ask him to 2-gap or play big boy football and take on a block, then they don't struggle as much. But they don't really ask him to do that a ton. And then what they want out of the 3 technique, that's where they want sort of their bigger, longer, type of player. That's why Gabriel Rubio, who is built like what we think is a nose tackle, 6'5", 322, is played more 3 technique. The other part of that is even then, there's still a lot of interchangeableness. I could go break down any game they played last year and show you at least this is a guess on the actual number. It's to make a point. I can show you at least 5 to 8 snaps in almost every game of Riley Mills lined up over the center. And I could show you even more snaps of Riley Mills going into the A-gap post-snap, where they'll slant, Howard's in the A-gap, strong or weak, and Riley's in the B-gap, strong or weak, and then at post-snap, Riley's in the A-gap, Howard's in the B-gap. Or they're twisting. And sometimes it's Riley going first. Sometimes it's Howard going first. And so they don't just line up and say, hey, you're the nose, you're in the A-gap all day, you're a D tackle, you're in the B-gap all day. Let's go have some fun and play ball. It's not really that. They want guys to be more disruptive, and that's why they're able to get away with it. I think that they would eventually like to get to a situation where their noses are bigger, though. I think that was more of, this is the talent we have. Let's utilize it. There's a reason they went out and got Sean Sevillano. There's a reason they went out and got Davion Dixon. There's a reason that the current defensive tackles they're recruiting are longer and bigger. I mean, Tiki Hola, I was told, measured in it at about just under 6'4", 304 pounds, or 302 pounds at his recent visit. He's still only 16 years old. They're trying to land Elijah Golden. He's 6'4", 275 with a massive frame. He's going to look a lot like Armel Mukam, I think, when it's all said and done. I mean, you saw pictures of him from the visit. I mean, just big old wide shoulders, big old head, big hands, big arms. He's a big boy. And that's ultimately where they want to go. You're not seeing them offer a lot of Howard Cross types. In fact, there's a really good Howard Cross type player from Chicago right now in the 2026 class named Gabe Hill, who's a really good football player. There's another kid from Chicago that I like named King Liggins, who's about 6'3", 275. And I know Notre Dame liked both of their films, but they made a decision of, we need bigger bodies. We want bigger bodies. Now, I don't think Notre Dame wants a bunch of the Sevillanos and Davion Dixons, but they want some. And that's why they love Devin Robertson. But two of the top D tackles on the board for next year are Braden Parks, who's like 6'3", 295, and Devin Robertson, who's like 6'3", 320. We saw them at Irish Invasion Trip. Those are big boys.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is just good coaching, which is this is where these guys fit. And the way that they play their 3 technique, I don't think a guy like Howard Cross and Donovan Hinish fits that position really well. So they kind of said, okay, at the nose, here's how we're going to use them. They're going to be penetrators. They're going to be quick and how they're going to play. But eventually I do think they'd like to get to the point where they can play more big boy football up the middle. And I think that's especially true with Chris Ash. So I think he'd like to be able to, yes, disrupt with your D tackles. You need them, you get after the quarterback and all that. But sometimes I like to be able to just come off and just say, I'm going to knock you in the face. And it's going to take 3 or 4 of y'all to block us. And that's going to let Drake Bowen and Kingston Asa and Jaden Osbury and Jalen Sneed, Matt Framo, Bodie Cahoon, all them linebackers just run to the football, because you're worried about either getting knocked back by us or we're shooting gaps with big boys and you guys have to turn your hips to handle those penetrators. I think that's eventually where they're trying to get to, but like good football coaches are supposed to do. But this is who we have. We have Kurt Hinish or Donovan Hinish and Howard Cross. So how do we run a scheme that fits those two guys? And that's where I give Al Golden and Al Washington a lot of credit. There were times where it'd get like, dude, let that kid attack. And Donovan struggled a little bit early last year, but once they finally started playing to his strengths, he was a dude. I mean, he gets talked – we'll get to him more down as we get to the individual players, but, like, he gets talked about so little by the fan base. And you're like, that guy was a stud for Notre Dame last year from, like, Florida State on. When he finally got thrust into, like, dude, you're kind of a starter now. We need you to be that guy. He was really good for Notre Dame. And – but you've got to play to his strengths. You can't ask him to be something he's not. And I think that's what they did a pretty great job of the last couple of years is don't ask Howard Cross and Donovan Hinish to be Lewis Nix, because they're not. Don't ask him to be Kurt Hinish, because they're not. But there's things that Kurt could do that Donovan can't, because Kurt was 30 pounds bigger at least, and a little bit just kind of maybe more power strength. There's things Donovan can do that Kurt can never dream of because he's so much more athletic. So play to their strengths. And I think that's what they did a great job of last year especially. And I thought they did a pretty good job of that in 2023 with Howard, but now we saw it even more last year. And that's why I think they were more effective. They said, hey, this is what these guys can do. Riley's not a 2-gapping 3 technique. He's not a dominant run stopper. He is a penetrator. So let's let him eat. He's a pass rusher. Let's let him eat. And same thing with the other guys. And I do think they're eventually going to want to transition away from that. But that's what good coaches do. Recruit what you want, coach what you have. It's the other way around. It's coach what you have and then recruit what you want. And then when you get what you want, then you coach what you want. And I think Al Washington and Al Golden did a great job of that.
Okay. Appreciate that. Not only just for the chat, but for me. So I appreciate you laying that out for us.
Did that answer your question?
No, 100%. And that I know, because people have asked me that question before, and I know that you are more in tune with like the scheme that they're attempting to do and things like that. And so I wanted to get that out there. And
I get the frustration when people see Kurt Hinish lining up still at nose tackle.
Yeah,
I get
for
it.
sure.
But you got to stop. thinking about it the way that we've always thought about it.
Exactly. Yes.
Where we think of like a Lewis Nix or
right.
Ian Williams and guys like that. It's just that's just not what they're going to ask him to do. But there's also a reason that they recruited in back-to-back classes 6'2", 340-pound Sean Sevillano and 6'2", 320-pound Davion Dixon.
Right.
But you didn't have those guys last year, not in a way that was ready to play.
Correct.
And that's what I thought. Good coaches are supposed to do.
Yeah, coach what you got. Don't try to put round pegs in square holes, right? I mean, that's what we're supposed to do, even though there are a lot of coaches that don't do that. But anyway, that's a different show for a different time. Let's talk depth chart here, Brian. And I know you got one ready to go. And so we'll pull this up and we'll just kind of go through it and kind of talk about the depth chart as a whole and just how it's different than it's been in the past. And I think that's something that we need to touch on as well. It's just a different looking depth chart, Brian. And I'll let you kind of go through. You've got it on here in numerical order, so not necessarily depth chart order, but I also think that there's a lot that needs to be figured out in fall camp, and then obviously in game prep as well to figure out, okay, what is the order that things are going to be in, because there's a lot of snaps that have gone around, but who is the guy? Who is that starting group? Could that change game to game? All of those different things. So I do think this is a good way to do it numerically, because I don't think they figured it out yet.
Yeah, and Trev, I would say to you real quick, I think this is a position more as much as any on defense where you just got to not really care about who's a starter and who's not. I think that's going to be a lot different than what we've seen. Last 2 years, it was very clear Mills and Cross were starters. I don't know that it's going to look like that this year, and I actually hope it doesn't look like that this year, especially at D-tackle. What are your thoughts, Trev?
Yeah, that goes back to the conversation we had about what production was lost from a season ago. Because as of right now, you have players with higher ceilings on the depth chart, but you don't have a proven commodity in a Riley Mills type or a preseason All-American type in what Howard Cross was entering the 2024 season. And I'm in line with both of you guys, and I do hope that it is waves. That is something that we saw in the spring. A lot of rotation on the interior of the defensive line. They'll trot out Gabe Rubio and then Jason Onye, and then they'll trot in Jared Dawson and then Donovan Heinisch, and then they'll leave in Heinisch and bring back in Rubio, and then they'll leave in Rubio and bring in Onye, and then they'll rotate in Hughes. And keeping your interior defensive line that fresh, one, when you're in the fourth quarter of a game and a center or an offensive guard is going on snap 75 and Jason Onye at 6'5", 302 is going on snap like 26, it's going to mean something. Could be a difference maker. But I think the rotation is also going to help because you have a significantly bigger unit this year across the board as well. Even your big guys from last year got bigger this offseason. Gabe Rubio, he put on a couple of pounds. Jason Onye is now over 300. Brennan Vernon put on a lot of weight. Elijah Hughes has put on weight since he came to South Bend. He's just 3 pounds shy of being over 300 pounds himself. Actually, I believe Jared Dawson actually dropped a couple.
He's the only guy that dropped weight. He dropped about 12 pounds on the depth chart, on the roster.
Yeah.
I'm curious what he's going to look like because I know one of the things that they were really working on trying to do was get him in a little better shape.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be why you see his weight where it is. But, yeah, that's kind of part of that.
Makes sense. But when you have a roster and a depth chart that kind of looks like I'll just say roster because this isn't like the 1-2 depth chart. But when you have a room that has this outlook, you want to start using these guys in waves. It sticks to what the coaching staff said all offseason about how you have to replace Mills and Cross's production with multiple people, not just 2 guys. And the room is as such where you now have the personnel to be utilizing multiple people because of some of the injuries that happened last year, because of the need of a Donovan Heinisch and a Gabe Rubio to step up in certain moments. Then you hope that guys like Armel Mukum, they take that next step. Jason Onye's, from what we've seen this spring, looks relocked back in. Hopefully he can pick up where he left off when he departed from the program last year. But there's a lot of people that if they take that next step, it's going to be a really deep defensive line room. It already is when you look at it on paper, but ideally now we see it on the field in just waves and waves of bodies coming at you.
Yeah, and it's bigger bodies too. If you look at last year's depth chart, guys, it's not going to be a whole lot taller. I do think the length is better. than last year. Riley wasn't super long. Howard wasn't super long. I think Jared Dawson looks, at least on film, has more length, and obviously Jason Onye's got crazy length. But if you just look at the top 5 guys last year, so that'd be Riley Mills, Howard Cross, Donovan Heinisch, Gabriel Rubio, and Jason Onye. They averaged 293.6 pounds, and there was one guy over 300 pounds, and that was Gabriel Rubio, because Jason Onye last year on the roster was listed at 291. Now you look at it, and the average weight is 298.6, and that's with Jared Dawson. And I'm just telling you guys, I will not be at all shocked if Jared Dawson is about 7 to 8 pounds bigger by the time we get to fall camp. I just think they were trying to work off some bad weight, and now you're going to put on some better weight this summer. And I would be surprised if he's back up to 295 or 300 pounds by the time we get back to fall camp. If that happens, then your average weight gets over 300 pounds. And even as it is, it's 5 pounds bigger than it was last year. And there's more length. And that doesn't even include, and so I'm only projecting a top 5 of Gabriel Rubio, Donovan Heinisch, Jared Dawson, Jason Onye, and Armel Mukum. It doesn't even get into if a Sean Sevillano or a Davion Dixon is able to force their way into the 2 deep this year. And you've seen Brennan Vernon put on a bunch of good weight. And so Donovan Heinisch is the same weight he was. Elijah Hughes is now getting close to 300 pounds, where last year Elijah Hughes would be your second biggest defensive lineman in your rotation because he'd have been right behind Gabriel Rubio. Now you look at it, if they thrust him into the rotation with, let's say they go to 6 men and he's the 6th guy, he'd be what, 4th? He'd be behind at 297. He'd be 3rd, but he'd be behind Onye. He'd be behind Mukum. He'd be behind Rubio. And I won't be shocked if, but like I said, when we get to fall camp, he's also then behind Jared Dawson. So it's a bigger group. I don't know. It's going to look different in how they attack, and we'll get into that as we dive into it. But guys, there's a lot of depth here. I just listed 6 players and didn't include Davion Dixon. I didn't include Brennan Vernon. I didn't include, some guys that could maybe help you out. But there's very good depth at the D tackle position. And I think there's a couple ends who could help out in some situations as well. Cole Mullins could still play inside in some nickel packages and could still move inside and help you out there. So it's not like, hey, this is your group, let's go to battle, and this is all you got. I do think there's some flexibility with certain things. So it's a good-looking group. It's an unproven group at Notre Dame in a lot of ways, and that's the bigger question. But if we're just looking at this depth chart just from God-given ability and talent, this is an impressive room. But that gets to what we're talking about, guys, where the ceiling is way up here, the floor is down here. The floor, I'm confident saying it's solid. I think the upside is outstanding, but there's just more questions about whether or not they're going to be able to get to that level.
I think one of the things that you and I have talked about for a while now, Brian, and it feels like it's kind of just a reoccurring conversation when we talk about the defense at Notre Dame. And some of it is schematic, some of it is game plan, some of it is personnel. But Notre Dame, we've talked about the fact that Notre Dame needs to improve in the run game when it comes to defense. And you said that the strength of a defense is up the middle, and that's where these guys reside. And a lot of the run game production defensively starts up the middle. We don't know the details of who's going to be out there when, and we're talking about waves of guys and all of these different things. But just from what we know right now and looking at this roster, looking at this room, do you feel like the run game production defensively can get better this year than it has been in recent years?
I think it should for 2 reasons. One is because you have more guys that are geared towards being run stoppers. Where last year, I would argue strongly that your 3 best D tackles were pass rushers first and run defenders second. And just so we're all clear, my top 3 D tackles last year are Mills, Cross, and Heinisch. And they are, without a doubt, pass rushers first and run stoppers second. And especially last year, I thought Howard Cross's ability against the run took a big step back, very big step back, because he was pretty decent against the run at times in 2023. I thought Riley Mills got better against the run last year than he did the year before, but he was still a pass rusher first. He had 7.5 sacks. He had 8.5 tackles for loss. That means he had 1 stop behind the line in the run game. And that's an area where we've talked a lot about. Just it's an area where it has to get better, and it needs to get better if this team is going to be, who they're going to be. Donovan Hinish had 4.5 sacks last year, 4.5 tackles for loss. That means he had 0 stops behind the line in the run game. And those are areas where you got to improve. So I just got done talking about how your 3 best guys last year against the run, your 3 best D tackles last year combined for 2.5 tackles for loss in the run game. They were great in the pass game. They combined for, 7.5 for Mills. He didn't even play last 3 games. You had 11.5 when you throw Cross in. And then you throw Hinish in, who had 4.5 second on the team. That's 11.5 plus 4.5. That's 16, right? Am I doing the math there correctly? So 11, 12. Yeah, 16. You had 2.5 run stops. You want to know why they weren't a great run defense last year? That's a big reason why. And you know what Al Golden didn't do last year? You know what Al Golden failed to do last year? Ask these guys to do something that they're not great at. And that's being a little bit, sarcastic there, but that's being a good coach. They're not great run defenders. So let them do things that they are good at. I think this group is built different because now I would argue your top 3 defensive tackles as of today are Gabriel Rubio, Jason Onye, and Donovan Hinish. 2 of those 3 are run defenders first and pass rushers second. And I would argue that Jason Onye has the best 2-way potential of any D tackle they've had in quite some time. Now, I still use the word potential for a 5th-year senior because he's never put it together for any kind of stretch of play. But we've seen in the last 2 springs that he can dominate the run and he can dominate the pass when he wants to. And that's going to be the big question is how good does Jason Onye want to be this year? But Gabriel Rubio, without question, is a run defender first. And I think that's something that makes this group unique, guys, because when you look at the rotation, you've got a nice blend of guys who are run defenders first. That would be Jason Onye. That would be Elijah Hughes, Sean Sevillano, Davion Dixon. I would argue that's true also of Marmel Mukum and Gabriel Rubio. But then you have 2 other guys that are better pass rushers first. Donovan Hinish and Jared Dawson. And then you have a guy like Onye, as I said, who could maybe be really good at both. I think Elijah Hughes has some potential to be good at both. So I think there's a little bit better of a blend this year where you can the snaps each week may look different depending on the type of team they're playing. The snaps are, I would imagine the snaps are going to look different against Syracuse than they will against, I'm just trying to think of a team, Texas A&M, who has a much bigger run game oriented offensive line. You'd likely see a very different pass, D-line usage in that game compared to Syracuse, who just basically runs the ball to keep you honest. I'm basing that off what teams were last year. Maybe Syracuse is more balanced this year. So I think that's the thing too, guys, is it gives you last year you had kind of, other than Rubio, like one type of guy for most of the year. This year, I think you have a much more blend of skills, which as a defensive line coach allows you to better say, hey, we can play against these guys. We can go shut them down. And we can, if we want to play big boy football, we can. If we want to play fast, we can. So like, okay, you think, okay, we're playing Georgia this week. We may want to go big boy. No. They're slow. Play your speed. Attack. Penetrate. There may be other weeks where it's like, hey, they're slow and fast, so we want to put some guys on the line that can blow those guards off the ball and just blow their run game up. There's different ways you can match personnel to attack teams in different ways. And I think that's something in the toolbox that Al Washington has now, that Chris Ash has now, that I don't know that Al Golden ever had. And the question is going to be, how do they use it? And I think that's the bigger question. But they should be better against the run. I think my only question at this point in time, Vince, is how much better? That's more the bigger question. How much better are they going to be than they were a year ago? How much more consistent can they be against the run than they were a year ago? Because I would argue that this schedule's loaded top to bottom with good quarterbacks and good running backs. Some of them you never heard of that you'll have a better idea of as we start prepping for games. You may not have heard of what I think it was a Turbo Richard. Is that what that kid's name is at BC?
Yeah.
You may not have heard of him yet, but you will. He's a good football player. You know, you probably don't have any idea who Jordan McDonald is, but you will when we start talking about BC. You know, you may they got some kids this year, guys, which I think are great that just have some great names. They got the NC State's top running back's name is Hollywood Smothers. Like, seriously, his name is Hollywood Smothers. And they got some great names this year, but there's some really good backs that they're going to have to face this year and good quarterbacks. So that's going to put a lot on these D tackles. So can they be better against the run? Yes. Should they be better against the run? Yes. Do they got to prove it to us that they can be? Yes. Part of that's going to be on Chris Ash, and part of that's going to be on the D tackle stepping up and being more physical at the point of attack, being more consistent. Like we pointed with like Gabriel Rubio, guys. Remember that 2-play series? We've talked about it before on the show. Where on play 1, Gabriel gets blown off the ball like 4 or 5 yards. The very next play against Georgia, he one-arms the D tackle, rocks him back, grabs the running back with his other arm and yanks him down. I'm like, how does that happen to the same guy 2 plays away? That's the thing. Is so Trev, yes, they should be better against the run. And they need to be better against the run because I'd be willing to sacrifice not having the number 1 pass defense and maybe your 6th or 7th to get 10 to 12 yards shaved off my run defense. I absolutely would be willing to make that sacrifice.
Yeah, Brian, you said it perfectly. Do I think they can be better than the run? Yes. Do they need to? Also, yes. Especially because of another position group that we're going to be talking about next week in the linebackers. We also project them to have a big step up and their role to be a little bit different than what it was under the Al Golden defense, the Al Golden-led defense. Not that that's good or bad. It's just a schematic difference. But they have the personnel to do it. I think the thing that leaves some people uneasy, and at times myself included, is because we don't truly know what Jason Onye's outlook is going to be. I agree with you. He has the most potential to be your most dynamic dual threat in that he can stop the run and get after the passer. But I would love to see it for more than 5 games at a time. You know, I mean, Gabe Rubio, again, was one of your more dominant run defenders last season when he was playing. Jared Dawson was able to do it at Louisville. I got to imagine that it would transfer over to South Bend. But it's just one of those things where seeing it happen on Notre Dame's defensive line matched up with these other guys, absolutely. I've been talking about Armel Mukum for a while. Is it that time in his 3rd year where he takes that jump? Gotta hope so. Elijah Hughes flashed at USC and the opportunities that he got to play. Crazy enough, Elijah Hughes played more snaps last year than Armel Mukum and Jason Onye did when he was at USC. But what's his role going to be this year? Kind of undefined. And so those are the questions that kind of leave people uneasy. But again, the thing I'm taking away from this is they have the personnel to be better in the run, but you said it perfectly at the end of what you were talking about, Brian. It's a necessity. They do have to be better against the run. That to me is one of the non-negotiables on defense this year.
Let's jump into the next part of our show here, and let's talk a little bit about each player individually. And you know, we touched on everybody, obviously, when we were talking about the depth chart and things like that. But I think it's important to jump in and talk about these guys individually. Yeah. So, look, this is a veteran group, right, Brian? And I think that's important to understand. Like, these guys aren't lacking for experience. It's not like we're talking about the quarterback position where they don't have a lot of experience, although we think they have a lot of talent. This group got on the field, and they got on the field in big games, and they were thrust into some very important moments, obviously, last year. And for the most part, were very successful as a whole. So I'm interested to see where they go, and let's talk about these guys kind of in order, Brian.
So what we'll do is we'll kind of go through it and just kind of talk about expectations and what we want to see from these guys, right? We've talked about it as a unit, but like specifically, like what do we need to see from each guy this year to let us know that this group is kind of ready to go be what we expect it to be. And I think we start off, you got to talk about Gabriel Rubio and Jason Onye. Because I think more than anybody else in the roster, these two guys are going to define how good this D-tackle room is. And look, if Jared Dawson is just as good as he was at Louisville, slightly better, Donovan Heinisch keeps doing his thing, Armel Mukum breaks out, those are all great things. But those things all need to happen within the framework of these two guys are carrying your room. And I don't care about leadership from those two guys. They've both had some of their fair share of things they've had to work through. I don't care about that. Let other people be the leaders of the D-line. Let Heinisch or other guys be that. I just need them to go out there and play really good, consistent football. And they've both shown flashes of being really good players. I think we saw a less disruptive Gabriel Rubio last year, in large part because I think he was dealing with the foot injury he had. He missed all of the spring last year because he was away from the team. And he also was in a situation where he was coming off of a foot injury and went out and just he wasn't, he wasn't the same guy that he had been before. He's always going to be a run defender first, but I think he has the chance to be a little bit more disruptive and to be more of an impactful player where some of those flashy plays become more consistent. And so that's what I need to see from Gabriel is just that guy that we've seen the flashes of, be that guy all the time. Or most of the time, be that physical, stout point of attack, knock people off the ball player. And for Jason Onye, it's one. Well, another thing about Gabriel Rubio is he struggled to stay healthy for entire seasons. He missed time and was even when he was playing, was a little banged up in 2023. He's got to show he can stay healthy. Jason Onye's got to show he can stay healthy and stay focused and stay locked in because I think him and Armel Mukum have the two highest ceilings on the position group. And when I look at a guy like Jason Onye, for example, we see a guy that has played dominant football at Notre Dame, and not just in spring games and jersey scrimmages and in practices. We're talking about he's shown flashes in games. I mean, against Purdue last year, he was an animal. Now, I know Purdue's team stunk, but Purdue had a couple D linemen or O linemen. One went and got drafted, and another one is a transfer. I think it was he went to USC, Trev, right? And you had him on your second team, first or second team all-opponent team, DJ Wingfield. And Jason Onye was not blockable against Purdue last year. And we've seen those flashes from him. He was pretty good, I thought, against Louisville as well. But can you be that guy every week? And so the biggest thing from Onye and Rubio is be locked in and be consistent. That's it. Because if they're locked in and consistent, they're going to be difference makers because the talent's there. And Jason Onye is one of those guys. And you see this happen from every now and then when you look around college football. There's that guy that nobody heard of, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, he just becomes like this dude. Xavier Watts was kind of like that in 2023. We knew about him, but nobody else in college football knew about him. He was a rotation safety the year before. And then all of a sudden, boom, unanimous All-American and then consensus All-American in back-to-back years. Jason Onye has that kind of potential to where they're like, who the heck is this guy? Who's 47? And why is he destroying Miami and Texas A&M? He has that kind of ability, and we need to see him be that kind of guy. So those two guys is where it starts, Trev. Expectations, be the best version of yourself every week because now you're being counted on to be that dude. You can't rely on Riley and Howard to carry the day anymore. You've got to be that guy now. And that's where it starts. If they can be that, this D-tackle rotation will be flipping good. Yeah. If they're not that, it'll be flashy but inconsistent. And it's hard to win a championship that way because when you play 3 to 4 games in the playoff, that 1 week where they're not that's when you get beat. And that's why they are the two biggest keys. And I'm excited about what they're going to do this year, but also a little bit reserved because can they do that every week? And even if they dominate the first 2 games, I'm like, well, now let's see what they do when they go play Purdue and Arkansas. But like they hold the key to this D tackle room reaching its full potential. I truly believe that. If everybody else is just solid and these two guys are what they could be, this is going to be a real good D tackle room.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that's what makes the role of the next two guys also important, in line with what Jason Onye and Gabriel Rubio have on their plate for this upcoming season. Next two guys that we're going to talk about, Donovan Heinisch and Jared Dawson. Brian, you brought it up when you began this segment talking about how, like, look, if players like Donovan Heinisch and Jared Dawson are just who they were, and Jared Dawson not taking his, snaps in production from 12 games at Louisville and then just putting that on a 15, 16 game season in South Bend, but relative to the amount of games. So if on a per snap basis, Jared Dawson is as productive as what he was at Louisville, and Donovan Heinisch is who he was from really Florida State on, that's a really good season for them. And they also play an integral role in the defensive line taking a step forward. Why it's so important, even if they just remain the same, and I expect a player like a Donovan Heinisch or a Jared Dawson to become a little bit more effective on a per snap basis based on being more of a part of a rotation, not by much, but still a little bit more effective than what they were last year, which is saying something because they were both very effective last season, is they're the change of pace guys. You have Jason Onye, who's 6'5", 302. You have Gabe Rubio, who's 6'5", 322, and they're just hammering the interior of the offensive line. Then you put in two athletic interior pass rushing guys in Donovan Heinisch and Jared Dawson. That's when that combination of what we were talking about on the depth chart earlier starts to play a role. And that is the role. That is my expectation for them this season, is be great in your own right, continue building off of what you did last season, and be really good change of pace guys. And that moving forward for them is going to be huge for this defensive line.
Jared Dawson's an interesting player, Trev, because he was a really good pass rusher at Louisville. He looks like a run stopper. He plays like a pass rusher. He was solid against the run, too. Don't get me wrong. He's not out there like just getting blown off the ball, but like he's a really good pass rusher. I did a breakdown of him when he picked Notre Dame. I'm actually going to see if I can pull that up, but I had a crazy stat to put in there. Yeah, listen to this stat here. So in 794 snaps over the two previous seasons, Jared Dawson had 13 and a half tackles for loss and 9 sacks. In that was in 3 seasons. In the 2 previous seasons, Howard Cross had played 1,136 snaps, had 12 and a half tackles for loss and 6 sacks. Riley Mills had 1,074 snaps, and he finished with 14 tackles for loss and 10 sacks. I'm going to repeat that. Howard Cross, Riley Mills, both at least 1,074 snaps. They had 14 and 12 and a half tackles for loss, 10 and 6 sacks. Jared Dawson, in 794 snaps, had 13 and a half tackles for loss and 9 sacks. And you want to know one of the reasons he was the top D tackle target on the board for Notre Dame when they went into the portal? Because he kicked the mess out of the Notre Dame offensive line in that game. Just all game was just killing Notre Dame's guards and centers. And that was a big part of that, is you need him to minimum just be that, because he actually has a chance to – I know that Marcus Freeman is doing the right thing by saying, like, how do we replace Riley Mills and Howard Cross? I'm like, well, if Jared Dawson is the guy he was at Louisville the last 2 years and he can stay healthy, something he struggled to do, then he's replacing Howard Cross and gives you actually, in my opinion, a better player, significantly better player than what you had from him last year. And so now the flip side is the reason he only played 794 snaps in 3 years is because his workload was smaller. I don't think you need to bump him up to be what Howard Cross did snaps-wise. You need him to be a little bit more than what he gave at Louisville, but you don't need him to be the 40, 50 snaps a game like Howard Cross was, because you do have better depth this season. But that goes back to Rubio and Onye, because if they don't step up, then you then are forced to play Heinisch and Dawson more, and now all of a sudden those two guys are wearing down by the end of the year. That also factors into why you need all 4 of these guys to step up and really play to their potential, because I don't know that any of these guys, I mean, Rubio can be and Onye can be, but I don't know if any of these guys are right now proven 40-plus snap a game guys. None of them have done it. And Donovan did it late last year, but that was having taken on that role in November. would he have been able to do that if he had to take on that role at A&M and then play it for 15 more games? That's a different question. So, but these two guys, this is where a lot of your pass rush is going to come from. And when one of these two guys on the field, and I'm very curious to see how Notre Dame uses the two of them. Now, Dawson's going to play some nose in 3 technique, and I think Donovan might play a little bit more of that too, but he's primarily going to be a nose. Do they use them together at all? Knowing that they're undersized, do they kind of use them as sort of interchangeable pieces? I'm very curious to see how that's going to play out because, to your point, Trev, these two guys bring you – this is where a lot of your playmaking could come from, is this duo. Jared Dawson's interesting too because talking to a couple sources, like he didn't know what it meant to work like a champion until he got to Notre Dame. It was a whole different animal at Louisville. And anyone that watched Ron English's defense last year knows there was not a lot of discipline on that football team. And I think there was an adjustment period for him. And that's why at times at practice we're like, was Jared Dawson out there? But then by the time we get to the blue gold game and the jersey scrimmage, you're like, that's the Jared Dawson that we saw at Louisville. So I think he's going to have a shot, if he can stay healthy, to be an even better player than he was because he's surrounded by guys that know how to work and know what the standard is for. You want to know what it takes to go play for a championship? We're going to show you and follow us. And from what I've been told so far, Jared Dawson's been receptive to it. That's part of the reason he came to Notre Dame. But you don't just snap your fingers and you have it all figured out. It's time to build, and you go through those days, those ups and down days. But I think that's going to benefit him a ton. And if Al Washington can kind of get him locked in and comfortable with, like, this is the Notre Dame way, he's a kid that, boy, I'll tell you what, man. That's going to be a difference maker for you, and that's where your pass rush partially comes from. I think that the combination, Trev, I'm curious your thoughts on this. I think the combination of Onye and Dawson, if they play to their potential, covers a lot of the pass rushing that you lost from Riley and Howard. Now, I don't know if either of them are as good as what Riley was last year, because Riley was really good. Like from Louisville to Indiana, Riley Mills is the best pass rushing D tackle I've seen in Notre Dame like in 30 years. With Jerry Tillery had a great game against Stanford in 2018, but Riley just was a dude every week. If these two guys play to their potential, however, as a duo, I don't think you're going to miss a whole lot from a pass rush standpoint, but I think that you could then also see them help you more in the run game also. Because I do think Jared Dawson last year was a better run defender than Howard Cross was last year. Maybe not 2023, because that's a different Howard Cross. But that's where I think those two guys could give you some of that, Trev, at least as individual pass rushers. And so, again, I'm very curious to see how those 4 guys are. And then, of course, Armel Mukam is another guy that I'll say this, Vince, and I'll get your thoughts on it. I said you can't be in a really top level championship caliber D tackle rotation without Onye and Rubio stepping up and being the best version of themselves. You guys both agree with that? Okay. You're going to definitely need, to Trev's point, Heinisch and Dawson to be what they were last year, to be that group as well. Agree with that? So 2 guys got to play to their potential. 2 guys just got to keep doing what you're doing. The difference between this being a really, really good group or an elite group is Armel Mukam breaking out. And this is a unique athlete. He's 6'4", 6'5", 302 pounds, thick kid. There's a picture of him that he put out the other day. Thick old boy. But there was plays in the spring where he was lining up on the edge. They were doing some 3D tackle looks, and they were putting Preston Zinner as like of a walk up down, like kind of like a 3-3 defense with Preston Zinner walk down. And Armel was rushing off the edge at 6'4", 6'5", and I think he was like 308 at the time. And you're like, okay, okay, this is going to be something now. Now, the thing with Armel is he's still learning the game. He's still learning how to use block destruction appropriately and different things like that, but he's grown a lot. If Al Washington can get Armel Mukam to have that junior year breakout season, that's what tips them over the top to be, you can't, it doesn't matter. I mean, he could do all that. You're still going to be a little inconsistent if you don't get Rubio and Onye to do their thing. But if they do their thing, the other two kids just do what they've been doing. Armo Mukum is the thing that puts you over the top, because now you got a guy that has the potential to be all of it. He's the most physically gifted guy on the roster, D-tackle. Maybe not for 2025. Maybe that could be Onye. But as far as like, if they all reach their full potential, who's the guy that could maybe be a high draft pick? It's Armo Mukum. And so he's another really important piece of this, Vince. I do think that if you look at it, him stepping up could be that missing ingredient to a championship defense, which you see from a lot of teams like that are really good. Like, what's that thing that takes that team over the top? It's this particular player. And I think Armo Mukum could be that for the D tackles. What say you, Vince? Do you agree, disagree that he is sort of that missing piece to the truly elite defensive line? I could even say.
I just think I'm excited to see number 88 sack a quarterback. Like that's where I'm at. No, I completely agree with you. I think that there are a lot of question marks with this group, and I think that if this group steps up, and Armo Mukum being one of those guys, because I think he's one of the bigger question marks of guys with, returning snaps. You know what I mean? That we don't know enough about. I mean, he only got 60 snaps, but he was productive in those 60 snaps.
And
I mean,
most of those were
mop up duty. I mean, most were. Call it what it is, right? So this is going to be a big step up moment. They didn't ask Armo Mukum to step in when other guys got hurt last year. Like, he wasn't asked to step in and play in the national championship game at a big moment at a big level, right? But right now, he's looked at as one of the guys who could potentially insert himself into this rotation. And I think that's a really important role. And going into your junior year, this is the time where you kind of decide who you are on this roster. There's not a lot of times where guys can wait until their senior year to be the guy, or to be in the rotation, or to be a key point or key part of that rotation. This is his junior year. This is his time. I do believe that. And then that also kind of parlays into a handful of other guys who, at least one of these guys is going to need to step up. If we're talking about 6 guys kind of in a defensive tackle rotation, we've talked about 5. So Sean Sevillano, Davian Dixon, Elijah Hughes. Like, which one of these other 3, Trev, do you foresee or has the opportunity to step up and maybe insert himself into that level?
Let me say one thing first. I want to give a stat to back up your point, Vince. Armo Mukum played 27 pass rush snaps last year. He had 3 pressures. If you give him the same number of snaps that Howard Cross played, and let's just say he maintains that pressure rate, he has 35 total pressures. Because you can say, well, he played 1. You're like, dude, he had 3 pressures. Like, I mean, how? Like, context, 27 pass rush snaps. What does that look like if that's projected over the course of an entire season? Yeah. And assuming, just for argument's sake, he keeps that rate, it's 35 snaps. And it should be noted that those came in 2 of the last 3 games that he played in. But to your point also, when there were injuries, he did not play a snap in the postseason.
Exactly.
He just wasn't ready yet.
Right.
So it's a lot to go from that to star.
Sure.
And he doesn't need to be that all the time. He just needs to be that at times. Like, I'm not saying he has to play
consistent.
Right. But just be dependable enough to say, we're going to put you out there. And then he's the one guy I'm okay being flashy, because that's when he starts to take over some games. And then the games he's not feeling, you can put him out. The other part of that too, Trev, is you don't have to put as much pressure on him if, this group that Vince is asking you about, the more of these guys show that they're ready to play. I think that also takes some of the pressure, because there's going to be some games this year where you can go deeper than 5. Maybe not Miami, maybe not A&M, but
especially since those are the first 2 games of the season.
There's some other games where if a couple of the guys from the group that Trev's about to break down can step up, then I think that takes some pressure off these guys. But I still say that you need Armel to be sort of that. He's got to be that flashy game changer at times. I don't need him to be that every single week. That's not the difference, but it's him becoming a guy that, like, dude, you got to play this guy. That's what I'm referring to. It's not if all 5 of these guys reach their maximum potential this year, that's not what I'm saying. But Armel has to be a guy that's more dependable, where you can say, hey, look, I don't just want you to dominate Virginia and Florida State's backups. I want you to do that to Miami starters. And that's a key. But like you said, Trev, there's a little something different in this next group of players that you don't have really outside of Rubio. And if they can force their way on the field, I think it has an impact, especially, Trev, on the run defense.
Yeah, there's 3 players on this that going into the fall camp, there's not a whole lot of expectations around where they're going to be at in the rotation because of the people that we just listed off. But if one of Sean Sevillano, Davian Dixon, who I don't know where he's at as far as his return to injury. Do you guys
believe
know?
He's going to – I believe Marcus Freeman said at the press conference he'll be good to go by fall camp, I believe is what he said.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, that's huge. That's huge news. I mean, Davian Dixon, you guys know, is the incoming true freshman, big-bodied kid. He's already over 300 pounds, isn't he? He's like – I know he's like 6'2", 6'3", over 300.
He's 322.
Yeah.
Big kid. He's a big boy.
Big kid. But the guy that I'm keeping my eye on that I think I truly don't know where he fits in this rotation is Elijah Hughes, because similar to Armel Mukam at USC, he played along multiple spots on the defensive line. I don't see a world where Sean Sevillano and Davian Dixon line up on the edge. I could be wrong, but I just don't see a world where that happens. But
that'd be fun to watch, though. That'd be really fun to watch.
That'd be just line them up on like a 9 technique and just have a tight end try to – no, that would be rough. But Elijah Hughes is the one guy where I don't really know how to evaluate what is his foundation, because at USC we watched him play on the interior where he got a sack. We also watched him play on the edge where he got a sack.
It's Nebraska in a close game.
Mm-hmm. And so he kind of presents that mix of what Armel Mukam brings to the table. Not as high of a ceiling as what Armel has. But I would make the argument that Elijah Hughes is one of the most versatile guys in the defensive tackle room, in that if it's an odd front or if there's a certain package where you wanted to line them up on the edge, you can. And that's another big bodied presence on the edge. Say if you're going up against like a Texas A&M where the defensive ends are, kind of struggling setting the edge. You have Josh Burnham, and then you also have like a bigger bodied guy in Cole Mullins, but maybe you think about sticking an Elijah Hughes on the edge to help set the edge. Who knows? But he's one of your more versatile guys. But to your guys' point, those 3 guys will also raise the floor, the overall floor of the room, because going into this fall camp, they haven't been talked about a whole lot. Davian Dixon was injured. Sean Sevillano is a big-bodied kid. I think he's the biggest kid on the team at 341.
I think it's him and Gerby, because I believe Gerby was also over 340 on the updated roster. I'm going to look that up right now. But he's definitely they're the same size. They're both 341. But Gerby's 6'7".
Yeah.
341. Sean Sevillano's maybe 6'2". Maybe 6'2" at 341.
Yeah.
That's a big joker right there, man. That's a big boy.
Yeah. Sean Sevillano's a big dude. And he definitely fits more of that, the prototype of the plugger up the middle, eat up space, that type of player. Davian Dixon has the molds of that. I don't know what's going to be expected with him because he's coming off of an injury and he's a true freshman. So really any meaningful minutes that you get from Davian Dixon in 2025, barring an injury, is just kind of gravy on top for me, building for the future. But Elijah Hughes is that one guy where he could sneak. He's kind of my dark horse for working his way into the rotation. If somebody were to ask me today on June 26th, hey, Trev, do you think that Elijah Hughes cracks the 5-man rotation? Not betting. I guess I don't have a mortgage. I won't bet Vince's mortgage on it, but I
definitely bet Vince's mortgage. I wouldn't bet mine, but I have no problem betting Vince's. Look at that puppy dog face.
Putting all those babies out on the street. What is wrong?
Hey, Dylan's got a cool dorm room up at Hillsdale.
Yeah,
that's true.
You guys you'll be fine. But would I bet on it? No, I wouldn't. But would it surprise me? No. He's kind of my dark horse to kind of work his way into the rotation because he's such a versatile player.
By the way, Sean is actually 343 on the roster. So he is their biggest guy. So you were correct. He's their biggest guy at 343. But again, even if they're changed, one guy's 6'7", one guy's 6'2", one guy's built more like this, where the other guy's built more like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something I'm going to bring this up. This is not part of what we're going to talk about, but I've had this thought before, and I think it's an interesting conversation to bring up. I don't know that I like going past 5 D tackles in a rotation, and I can get away with 4 most weeks, but I kind of like having the idea of 5, maybe a 6th guy. I think if Armel Mukum has a really good fall camp and Sean Sevillano has a really good fall camp, I would seriously be interested to see if the staff would be willing to do this and if Elijah Hughes would be willing to do it also. But if he's kind of like down there around like 5 or 6, I'd sit down and have a heart-to-heart with him about, man, we think you can help us and we want you to be queued up and we're going to play you 4 games this regular season. But we're going to redshirt you. You're going to play 4 games regular season. You'll be available for the postseason. Because remember, they blew his red shirt in 2023 at USC. He never redshirted. So he played as a true freshman at USC. They played him in, I think it was like 6 or 7 games. So I would, because you're looking at it, and again, this is, he's a 2023 class kid. You're going to lose Rubio after this year. You're going to lose Onye after this year. You're going to lose Jared Dawson after this year. Donovan Heinisch only has 1 year left after this. So you're going to lose 3 guys in this rotation, and there's a lot of youth behind that. You could maybe really benefit from Elijah Hughes having that extra year to now knowing you could have him for 3 seasons where, you can still play him in 4 games and then have him for potentially 3 to 4 games in the postseason. And then he still has 2 years after that, as opposed to after 2026, you're not going to have Heinisch, Onye, Hughes, Dawson, or Rubio. And, I'm very high on Gordy Solsted's upside. You guys know that I liked that pickup, but he's 260 right now. I don't know if he's going to be ready by 26 or by 2027. You don't know that. Maybe he will be. So those are things that I look at, guys. That'd be a very interesting discussion or problem to have, but that doesn't happen if Mukum doesn't step up. It doesn't happen if one of Sevillano or Dixon, and I think ideally Sevillano would be that guy for the exact reason, because then you can maybe, redshirt him. But there's enough depth there where you can play some guys and in 4 games and still keep that redshirt. And I'd be very curious if that's something Notre Dame would consider with him.
That's fascinating.
Like I said, if he's willing to do it, you could kind of say, hey, look, maybe we're not going to play you early, but we're going to play you the last 4 games of the regular season. And that way you're kind of in a groove, ready to go into the postseason. And you can play 7-8 games for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he's only played 8. He played 8 games his freshman year and 7 games his sophomore year. So, I mean, that's like,
and he wasn't hurt.
It's kind of his window. You know what I mean? As far as like games played per year. So, I mean, if you play in the last 4 of the regular season, then he plays the entire postseason.
But then he's going into 26 and 27 with a chance to become a starter.
Right. Exactly. For 2 years.
Right.
For 2 years as a starter.
Right.
That's
so to piggyback, another question then off of Brian's point, who do you think would dictate that more, the guys at the top or Sean Sevillano and Davian Dixon? Because Sean Sevillano already has his red shirt.
I think it's Mukum and him, and it's not. It's if because like, I mean, Onye and Rubio are going to play now. If they get injured, then obviously that changes some things. But it's more so, is Armel a guy that's like, look, we can play this guy. Like he's a dude for us. And if one of those guys gets hurt, we're okay. We're okay using him to be a starter for us. And then you need Sean Sevillano to be like, dude, can you give us 15, 20 snaps a game? And that's going to be a key, because between Davion and Hughes, you basically have 8 games you can play one of the 2. And I would say I would play one of them. Like, have a plan going into this game. If we need you, we're going to play Davion. And going into this game, if we need you, we're going to play Elijah, knowing that you can have Elijah for the playoffs. That's why I'd say don't use him in like the Purdue game in a blowout. Use Davion or, some other guys, Brennan Vernon, Sevillano. But then you start getting up to like late October maybe you get him into a game, and then but then by November in your last 4 games, which would be against what? Your last 4 games are, I think, Navy, Syracuse, Pitt, and Stanford, correct? Isn't that the last 4 games? Not in right order, but like that's the last 4 games. It'd be nice to like kind of have a kid like him to throw into the rotation if you need to. And then now he could be part of the rotation in the playoffs. So just something to think about. But it only happens if I think Armel and Sevillano prove themselves capable of helping you. Because at the end of the day, your number one priority is winning in 2025. And if Elijah Hughes gives you your best chance to do that, then you play him. If he's that good, play him. It's just that if he's sitting there at like 5, if he's 3 or 4, play him. Like, play him. Conversation's over, play him. Because now you're a rotation guy. We need you to win. But if he's there, like, let's say it's Onye, it's Rubio, it's Heinisch, it's Dawson, that's your 4. And then he's kind of down there with Sevillano and he's ahead of Sevillano. He's your 5, though. I would seriously have that conversation. And I'd have him, like, dude, we're not throwing you down there playing scout team. You're going to be up here with us. But this is the reason for it. And see if he's interested in it, because it would be better for his future. It'd be better for the future of the position group if they can accomplish that. But as I stated, it only happens if you trust the other guys, because you'd hate to not play him at all in September, and then guys aren't stepping up, and then now you've got to play him the rest of the year, and you just missed 4 or 5 games of opportunity for games to play him and get him ready if he was able to help you. So it's one of those tricky things that Notre Dame finds themselves in at several positions with some guys where it's like, and this guy, you'd like to redshirt this guy, but he might be too good to redshirt. And I think Elijah Hughes could be one of those. So just something to think about with Elijah Hughes moving forward.
Yeah, it's definitely not a bad thought. I think in an ideal world, you get him in for snaps in Miami, Texas A&M, USC, and Pitt. Because if you can unlock him for the postseason, my only hesitation of that would be like if the only 4 games he was in was like against Purdue, Navy, Syracuse, and Stanford.
What I was thinking was more, don't activate him till later in the year at all. Okay. Because then you're in a position where, because like what would be bad is if you get in a situation where he plays the first 2 games and now you only have 2 games to work with. Well, what if there's a big injury in like late October and now he has to now play, but you've already used 2 of the games. And so he can only play 2 games if you're going to redshirt, or you just blow the redshirt. Now you just wasted 2. So that's why I was kind of thinking like maybe wait until you get to closer to November and then try to get him going then, because then it's like, if there's an injury, you can kind of use them more, but that way you don't kind of use 2 of those redshirt bullets in the first 2 games. If he's 5th on the depth chart,
sure.
Again, if he's top 4 going into that game, he's playing.
Yeah, you play him.
He's playing. And this thing is like, this all is contingent upon. So that's, I guess, to your point, Trev, that is where maybe Onye and Rubio are kind of part of this. But I feel confident saying this is the top 4. Onye, Rubio, Dawson, Heinisch. But if he's out playing one of those 4 guys, this conversation is as useless as redshirting him, because he's a dude you need right now to help you win. He's earned that right now. But my whole thing is if he's like 5,
I get that. Yeah.
Do you really need your 5th D tackle to beat Miami and Texas A&M? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So I'd activate him. He's going to go through the week getting reps during the week. And if his number needs to be called, then we call it. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not throwing him down there on scout team all year. It's more so like, dude, you're with us. You're prepping every week. Like, we may need you. They do that with quarterbacks all the time, where, they'll have a young quarterback up with the quote unquote varsity, game prepping, all that kind of stuff, but he doesn't get played. And, they're smart about playing him because you never know when his number is going to be called. He needs to be ready to play. So that's where I'm coming from. So just a thought before we move into the last section. Just a thought.
Yeah. I think it's a great thought. It's something I hadn't even thought about, but it makes a lot of sense. And the
postseason rule changes it for me.
Yeah, right.
Because it used to be where it's like you could never play a guy at all.
Right.
So the minute you put him in, it's
over. Like one play. And
done.
But
now it's like, okay, 4 games and a meaningless bowl game is fine. But now you're talking about if you play 4 regular season games, especially late in the year, the way that it works for Notre Dame is you may play 3 or 4 more games if this team is what we think it is.
And nothing in the playoff counts, which is
exactly.
Wow.
He could play 40 snaps a game in the playoffs.
Right.
Well, if like what happened last year happens, all of a sudden he's not a guy that's getting 15 snaps, but he's now a guy getting 30 snaps because you lose your All-American D tackle in game one of the playoffs. So it's just kind of a thought I had, and it helps the future because now Elijah would have 2 years to still play, to where that guy could maybe be a starter for you. Now maybe he's the 3 next year or the 1 next year. But then if he's like him and Heinisch, let's say him and Heinisch are starting next year. Just for him Heinisch and Mookum are the 3 next year. Well, then now you're going to 2027 and 2 of those 3 guys are gone. Whereas now you're going into 27 and you're going into year 2 of Mookum and Hughes as your starters. What does that look like? So just a thought that I had about it that could maybe something to consider moving forward. He may not want to do it. I would let the kid have a say in it.
Sure.
It's definitely something to talk about. All
right. Well, that's going to do it for our specific player breakdown. We've still got more to come, so don't go anywhere. But that's going to do it for our depth chart breakdown. And in the meantime, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Share with your family and friends. Of course, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com for all of your recruiting intel and any other kind of intel that is there. We are heading into a period, where the dominoes just keep on falling. So I'm telling you, if you're not locked into Irish Breakdown, the premium message board, you don't know what domino's coming next. So you got to be locked in, and that's where you do it, at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And of course, jump over to irishbreakdown.com as well, because there's all kinds of good written content over there, and I highly recommend that. And that doesn't cost you a dime, but it helps us. So I appreciate it very much. So jump on the podcast, give us a 5-star review, subscribe, all of those different things. We really appreciate it. It doesn't cost you anything except for your time, which we appreciate. And we will always be giving you our best. So jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, gentlemen, let's jump into the final part of the Notre Dame portion of today's show. We still have some more coming after that, but the final defensive tackle breakdown. And this is where we get to kind of have a little bit of fun. We get to talk about kind of our biggest questions, what needs to improve, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're going to jump right into this thing. Trevor, I'm going to start with you. What are some of your biggest questions for this group, for the defensive tackles going into the 2025 season?
Yeah, guys, it starts at the top. We put a lot of emphasis talking throughout the show about the potential of Rubio and Onye together as a unit. One, can they just stay on the field? You go back and look at 2024 in a review. Rubio wasn't a part of the team in the spring. He was dealing with off the field issues, and then he's back for the summer, but then he gets hurt, and then he misses the first half of the regular season. Then he makes it back. Complete opposite scenario for Jason Onye. He was there in the spring, had a great spring, heard great things throughout summer and fall camp. Many regarded him as the best interior defensive lineman that Notre Dame had in the first 5 games, and then he doesn't finish the rest of the season, also due to personal reasons. And so we're talking about 2 guys that kind of carry the balance of Notre Dame's defensive line room and how good they're going to be, and neither of them played full seasons last year. And that is a question. Now, they have the potential, the talent, the size, everything that we've talked about today to be elite talents in the interior defensive line, but can they play up to their potential? It's a big question, Brian.
It is. I mean, that's so much of this conversation, Trevor, it's can we even get to the play to your potential conversation without first saying, okay, can they even be there every week? Can they be counted on to show up every week? And just from a health standpoint, and a lot of that's bad luck. Gabriel Rubio is a very tough kid.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like he was like, oh, I have a hangnail, I can't play for the next 3 weeks. I mean, he had legitimate injuries. It's not a question of toughness with either one of those kids. It's a question of just, is your body durable enough for you to be able to be there? Are you going to be focused enough? Are you going to make the right decisions off the field to make sure that you are there for your teammates every week? And that's something that's obviously a big part of this process for them, because they need to answer that question first, or show that first, before we can get into can they reach their full potential. But yes, absolutely. Like, you need these 2 guys to be like dudes for you this year. It's not just like, hey, you're a nice rotation player. They've been that for the last couple of years. It's now time to say, hey, Gabriel Rubio, man, you were a top recruit. Like, we thought you could be something special. And, while we've appreciated the role you've had so far and you've played your role well, you're in a different role now. I need you to go out there and be a more effective, more impactful player. I need you to – and there's going to be games where Gabriel Rubio finishes a game with a tackle and no tackles for loss and no sacks. And the three of us are going to be texting on Sunday like, dude, I'm rewatching the game right now. Like, there were two guys on Gabriel Rubio the entire game. Like, you want to know why Drake Bowen had 14 tackles, 10 solos? He was running through the gap to the left or right of Gabriel Rubio all game long. And he's going to have games like that where it doesn't show up in the stat sheet. But you're like, dude, he was an animal up the middle of this game. And there's going to be games where he had 2.5 tackles for loss and a sack. I mean, it's just his game is unique that way because, like Trev, you pointed out in a previous show, he showed very little pass rush ability this year. Yep. Very. I think that was more of a byproduct of the foot injury than it was him not being able to do that and missing the whole spring because he had, for example, if you look at the Pro Football Focus numbers last year, he played 130 snaps last year in pass rush snaps last year and had a grand total of 1 pressure, and it was a sack. And that was against USC. We remember that play. The year before, in only 68 pass rush snaps, he had 8 pressures. As a redshirt freshman in 2022, in only 102 pass rush snaps, he had 7 pressures, including 3 hits on the quarterback. So he has shown to be that guy when healthy. I actually think Gabriel battled last year. I think he battled hard, and he was good at the end of the year. I mean, he had some inconsistency like he always has, but like the last 3 games that he finished the year, according to Pro Football Focus, with 13 run stops, which is also not a great number for the number of snaps he played, but 5 of those were in the Sugar Bowl, Orange Bowl, and championship game. So he's 1 away from half coming in the 3 biggest games this young man has ever played in his life. Were in those so they came in those games. So that's the thing with Gabriel is we've seen him be able to do both things well. The question is, can he do it on a more consistent basis? Because we've seen good Gabriel Rubio, and good Gabriel Rubio is a really good football player. But we've also seen Gabriel Rubio on the sideline in street clothes. We've seen Gabriel Rubio look very blockable. It's just, how do you want to finish your career? And I think this kid loves Notre Dame. There's a reason he hasn't transferred yet. As a former top 100 recruit that has basically been a rotation player for 4 years and dealt with some, being away from the team, and he could have transferred. But he's like, no, I want to be at Notre Dame. I want to finish this thing. And so I think it'd be great to see him finish on a strong note, Trev, but it's like, I mean, that's all fine and dandy, and it sounds all great. But the biggest thing is can you stay on the field and to get to that point? But you said it earlier, these 2 kids playing to their potential is so important to this team. Yeah. But I would argue along with Eli Raridan, because he's like the offensive version of these 2 guys. It's you're asking guys who have produced very little to produce a lot. And that gets dicey. Like asking Jaden Greathouse to do what he did the last 2 games for a whole season is not asking a whole lot. I don't mean production-wise, but just playing at a high level-wise.
Impact, yeah.
Because he was like that for most of the season. The ball finally came his way. This is different with these guys, yeah. Trev. And so it's like, that's the biggest question. And look, I can tell you until I'm blue in the face, I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. That's a guess. That's wishful thinking. It's got to happen. And I'd love to see these 2 young men finish it. And then the second question, Trev, when we talk about this defense is, we have some ideas, but it's still a question mark until proven otherwise. Where does the pass rush come from up the middle of the defense?
That's a question that a lot of units are going to have when you go from having a known commodity in Riley Mills and what he did last season, generating 34 pressures, 7.5 sacks, to guys who project like they could. We know what Donovan Heinisch is. I'm very excited to watch him in a bigger sample size than just from Florida State to the end of the year. I'm very excited to watch him from game 1 to game 15 or 16. But then past Donovan Heinisch, it's, okay, what does it look like for Jared Dawson? Do you repeat what you did at Louisville? Can you take maybe an extra 2 snaps a game than what you did? Not much, but over the grand course of a season, it's a big impact, especially with how efficient of a pass rusher he is. Does Al Washington, does Armel Mukam take the necessary steps to unlock Armel Mukam's potential? The beginning of his potential. Now, I'm not going to stand here and scream from the rooftops that Armel Mukam is going to end the season with 34 pressures and 7.5 sacks.
Be nice.
Man, wouldn't be mad. Would not be mad about it. If your fourth guy in the rotation is doing that, yeah.
Well, I don't think he'd be the fourth guy in the rotation by you got to that point in time. But
that's a very good point. That's a very good point. But if they can take the necessary steps in unlocking his potential, that's another added pass rush bonus. Like we talked about, what do you do with the enigma that is Elijah Hughes? Where do you play him? Where does he fit in the rotation? Does Jason Onye take that step and become a fully well-rounded defensive tackle? And that he's one of your best run stoppers and one of your most efficient pass rushers. Who knows? The potential's there, but very similar to really all the questions that we have about this group, the tools are there. But now it's just you got to go out and do it over the course of a season.
Yeah, because we've brought up Jared Dawson a lot, Vince. It comes down to, are you going to be Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who gets to Notre Dame and has the best year of your career, or are you R.J. Oben, who comes to Notre Dame with the expectations of adding pass rush potential out of the ACC, but then it showed up one time all year.
It really mattered.
A big flipping one time.
Yes, it was.
You know what I mean?
Yes, it was.
And that's why I say, look, R.J. Oben is if you evaluate, it's like it was a disappointing season. But sure. I've said this before: the further we get away from that, the more people are going to think, "Man, that was a great portal pickup," because they're just going to remember that one play against Georgia, and it was a huge play. And props to the kid. But the point is, you're going to need Jared Dawson to be better than what R.J. Oben was. You're going to need him to kind of have a similar impact to what Javonte Jean-Baptiste, where he comes to Notre Dame and has the best year of his career as a sixth-year senior. And now you're hoping that Jared Dawson can give you the same thing. And that's like you said, because he does help answer a lot of those pass rush questions. If he's that guy, he really does. He really does. But then the final thing is, Vince, who are the breakout players?
Right. And that's going to be you could look at this list of defensive tackles, and I think you could make a case for a lot of them, to be perfectly honest with you. I think that's going to be fascinating.
And you consider our 3 levels of breakouts?
Right. Yes.
You're absolutely spot on.
Yes, 100%. And I'm going to take it from the perspective of breakout onto a national level, like a talked about national level. And again, you could make a case for a lot of these different guys. I think just from the way his career has gone up to this point, I don't know that I want it to happen more than I think it is going to happen, because I really want it to happen. I want it to be Jason Onye. And I know he's slated in kind of as the starter right now. The way his career trajectory has gone, it's been 2 years since he kind of thrust himself onto the scene. And we've talked about this before, like in spring practice. And like he was the talk of all of the media because he was, he liked to talk at practice and everybody heard him and he was making plays in the spring. And then that following year was kind of nowhere to be found in 23. And then in 24, okay, Jason Onye's back. He's going to be an impactful player this year. And he kind of was. And then he had to step away from the team for a while. And now he's back and he's kind of this new man and he's kind of rebuilt his body a little bit. And now he's supposedly a leader and he's doing all these great things. It's time. Like if it's time for anybody to be that breakout player, to me, it's time for Jason Onye to be that guy. I think that he just needs to put together kind of his practice self, his off the field self, to now put it on the field and be that impactful player. Like that's what and again, I don't know if it's just what I really want to happen more than I think it's going to happen, but I do think
it'd be a great story. I love redemption stories.
Me too.
Like, those 100%. Are great.
And I think he's
really talented
to do it. Yes,
there's no question.
That's exactly right.
The talent's not the question, Jason Onye.
Correct.
It's not.
It's just, can you put all of these pieces together to make a whole? And if he does that, and I think he's got a good chance to do it. If he can do that, I think he is going to be a breakout player this year. I think he's going to be a leader in that room. I think he's going to be a leader on the field, and he's going to have production that will back that up. And he will be the leader that propels this defense to be that run-stopping defense that we want so badly.
Yeah, again, I don't know that I would use leader in Onye and Rubio in the same sentence. I don't want them thinking, or are you just talking about leader by how he plays?
How he plays.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I think this is a position, like most positions at Notre Dame, you really only need one. You either need guys to keep doing what you're doing, or you just need really one guy to kind of break out. This is a position where I think you need two.
Yes.
And I don't know, Trev, that you necessarily need two stars. But like one guy steps up to an impact role, but then you need somebody like a Mukum, like a Sevillano, that's that next level of breakout, which is a guy that never played meaningful downs. So now all of a sudden, you're a very important part of the rotation. I don't need Armel Mukum to become a star this year for 16 games. I need him or 15 games. I need Armel Mukum to show flashes of that, but someone that I can at least count on for 15 to 20 snaps a game. And then still have some of those really impressive moments. That I think at least two of those is needed this position, which is why the D tackle position gives me the most pause of I don't know what they're going to be, guys, because there is a lot of ifs. There's a lot more ifs here than there is everywhere else. Where, and you know, look, if Jade Gratis just do what you did last year, basically, and hopefully the quarterback will get you the ball more. Jordan Faison, dude, just be healthy and you're fine. When you're healthy, you're a dude. Malachi Fields, do what you did last year. Will Pauling, do what you did the last time you played for Mike Brown. Eli Raridan, you know, like that's an if. That's an unknown. Kevin Bauman, that's an if. That's an unknown. Offensive line, dude, just make normal progression. Just stay. There's not a lot of ifs for Notre Dame this year at a lot of positions. This is one where there's a ton of ifs, and that's what gives me a little bit of pause. But it speaks to the talent of the football team, because the ifs are guys that if it works out, they're not just solid football players. They're NFL football players. And that's what you need. I don't need a first-round draft pick at D tackle. They didn't have one last year. If 4 or 5 guys are playing like future NFL players. Because then it's the waves thing that you were talking about earlier, Vince, at the beginning. And so that's why, Trev, I think it's important that you need one guy to break out to be kind of a difference maker, but you need at least one more guy to break out and be like, dude, you're going to be a really important part of this rotation. I do think you need that second guy. I don't think that it can just be one for the D tackle to really carry the defense. It doesn't mean you still can't play for a championship or win a championship. It's more so about this unit being a driver of that success, because they didn't have that last year in the Sugar Bowl or the Orange Bowl. They had that guy in the first round of playoff, but they didn't have that guy after that, and still won 2 big games. But but they weren't the driver of the success in the second game that they won. They were a pretty big part of the first game they won without Riley, but not the second one. And that's going to be the key.
Yeah, you definitely need your impact player to step up. I'm in line with Vince there. I do think it's going to be Jason Onye for just everything that we've talked about today. I think he's one of your most well-rounded. He has all the physical tools in the world. Now you just have to put it together. As far as who's going to take that next step as becoming an impact player, not necessarily the star, but impacts the rotation, I do think it's going to be Armel Mukum, who's going to be the next Donovan Heinisch that steps up. I will be as transparent as possible. I was in the camp of I didn't expect much from Donovan Heinisch last year. Man, I did fall guilty to the – I mean, he's 6'2", 275. You have Riley Mills and Howard Cross coming back. I don't know what to expect out of Donovan Heinisch. Then he stepped up from Florida State on, and he was a very impactful part of that rotation. Who's that next guy? I think it's going to be Armel Mukum. I do. And then somebody else that just burst onto the scene, Sean Sevillano. I think he took a redshirt year. He worked on becoming a more well-rounded football player. He's got the size. But would it shock me at all if it was Davian Dixon or Elijah Hughes? No, it wouldn't. Wouldn't at all. We've talked a lot about, their biggest questions and a lot of ifs. But what are some of the things in your eyes, Brian, that this group –
Real quick. You talk about breaking out last year. Last year in his PFF stats, in 318 pass rush snaps, Howard Cross had 22 pressures and 5 hits on the quarterback. Last year in only 229 pass rush snaps, so that would be 71, 89 less. Donovan Hinish had 19 pressures, so that's only 3 less than Howard Cross. He had 9 hits plus sacks on the quarterback last year, which was tied for second on the defense with Jalen Snead, behind Riley Mills. Like, he wasn't just like, he was really good. Backing up what you were saying, Trev. You put some numbers to it. You're like, hey, that guy was pretty good. And the thing is, he had, going into the Florida State game, Donovan Hinish had 4 pressures.
Man.
And hadn't played a ton of football, 3 games with over 20 snaps, never more than 26. Something he did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times after Howard Cross got hurt. So that would mean in the last 8 games, he had 15 pressures. And he had 2 sacks plus hits in the first would be 7 games. So hold on, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then he played 8 more. Okay, so yeah. So in the first 8 games, he had 2 hits plus sacks on the quarterback. In the last 8 games, he had 7. It backs up what you said, Trev. Is like when that opportunity came for him to take on a bigger role, and hey, we now need you to step up and give us what we're losing. He said, I'm not going to give you that. I'm going to give it to you even better.
Yeah.
And that's why last year's team was so good, is because there were times when they lost guys where the guy that came in either matched, like Leonard Moore, or surpassed the performance of the guy they replaced. And that is a really impressive part of it. And, it's why Donovan Hinish is going to be a key part of what they're doing this year. So you can lead that question in, Trev, but I just wanted to back up the point you made with the data to show this isn't just a feeling that Trevor had, like we saw him more. So now we felt it. The numbers back it up. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, no, I appreciate it. I mean, he was an integral part of their success down the stretch, especially in the postseason. He had the game-sealing sack against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. So my tune around Donovan Hinish has completely changed from where it was. And not that I thought that he sucked. It was just, where does he fit in a rotation with Howard Cross and Riley Mills going into the 2024 season? Now, going into the 2025 season, though, Vince, I'll kick it to you. I'll leave it to the open floor, whoever wants to take this. But we've talked a lot about ifs so far in this segment. But what are some of the things that this unit has to prove? What do they have to show us? What do they have to show Al Washington?
Specifically. Yeah.
Oh, look, the first thing, and sometimes it's out of your control, and we know this, but this group has to show that they can be healthy. That's the biggest thing. This group was absolutely decimated by injury, and you can go entire defensive line if you want, and it's still accurate, but they were just decimated by injury. And that's why all these guys have so much experience coming in, because some of these guys were thrust into action and did yeoman's work, right, last season and helped them get to the national championship game. They have to stay healthy. I mean, this group, we know they're deep. We're talking about the depth of this group. We're talking about the possibilities of what they can be, and all that goes out the window if they're not on the field, right? And this group can't sustain the injury. Well, I would have said this last year too. I would have said this group can't sustain these injuries, the ones that they actually did sustain, and they ended up okay. But even more so, this group, I feel like they can't take a bunch of shots of guys being out and still be the group that they need to be. So I think they just, again, some of it's out of your control, and I get that, but they need to stay healthy. This group needs to stay healthy for the most part. You're going to get your bumps and your bruises, and a lot of things can happen over a 16-game schedule. But I think this group just absolutely needs to stay healthy. That's the biggest thing for me, because I think they're all on a good trajectory, in my opinion. They just need to stay healthy so they can stay on track.
Yeah, and I think the last 2 things, Trev, are number one, we talked a lot about it earlier, is be better against the run. That means being more stout against the run, holding up blockers, whether that means the linebackers are making more plays. But you can't go a whole year, in my opinion, again, where your defensive tackles produce 2.5 tackles for loss in the run game. It's unacceptable. And you were fortunate because they didn't really play a lot. We've said this. Look, one thing we got to be real about it, right? I keep telling you guys to stop saying right at the end of sentences, and then I keep doing it. But we can be real about this. Part of what helped Notre Dame be as good as they were on defense last year, and they were very, very, very good, is they didn't play a lot of very good offenses. And they didn't play a lot of good offenses that could really run the ball effectively outside of a couple option teams. So you were kind of able to get by with not being real impactful in the run game. And you also jumped on people early and had a lot of blowouts where they weren't trying to run the ball a whole lot on your starting defensive line. But this year, when we look at it, I mean, I think, Trev, you and I have one for sure running back room in here. I think two. You have two, actually. And then there's another one or you did have two. I think you changed it. I think you dropped one out. But there's one running back room on here that Notre Dame plays in our top 10. There's two others that were right on the cusp. But there's some just top to bottom, some really good backs and offensive lines they play this year. When we do our top 10 offensive line ranking next, there's definitely going to be two Notre Dame opponents on that list for sure. So your level of play has to be better against the run this year on D linemen. Now, that doesn't always mean tackles for loss. Sometimes that just means the two of us force three of them to block us, or in the perfect world, four of them to block us, and that means our linebackers are flying to the ball. But it also has to mean at times I'm making plays like we saw Gabriel Rubio make against Georgia. You got to be the ones making those plays more frequently in the run game. And that's another thing. And then the last thing is, and this is the most important, Trev, they've got to play consistently good in the biggest games. And one disappointing aspect of last season, if we're valuing the D tackles, is there were games where they didn't play well in the big games. And that includes the opener against Texas A&M when they had a healthy Riley Mills and a healthy Howard Cross. They did not play very well in that game, in my opinion. They did not play very well against Northern Illinois, which turned out to be a bad game. They did not play well in the first half against USC, in my opinion, especially against the run. They did not play well, obviously, once Riley Mills went down. They played great that next game. Did not play very well against Penn State. Did not play very well against Ohio State. They're going to have to be better in those big moments. I don't care about them dominating BC or Purdue, or they've got to be able to play good. Doesn't always have to be elite, but you got to play at least good football against Miami, Texas A&M. You got to play good football against USC. You got to play good football against NC State. You got to play good football against Pitt and Syracuse, and then whoever you play in the playoff. I think that's going to be a final piece for me, fellas, is can this unit, a bunch of guys who have not proven that they can be that with any consistency, be counted on in the biggest, when the lights are brightest this season? That might be the biggest question that I have about this unit, to be honest with you.
Yeah, when you look at their performance in big games, I think two things can be true. It is true that they didn't have Riley Mills in those games, but it is also true that they had a handful of guys that we talked about today. They had Gabriel Rubio. They had Donovan Heinisch. They had Armel Mukum, who we even said wasn't ready to go in those big moments. Big game. I'm a huge big game evaluator, like we all are, because I carry more weight in what you do against Penn State, Georgia, Texas, the Ohio States of the world than I do what you do against Stanford and Boston College. I just will, because of the impact of what your performance in those games mean. And I'm right there in line with you. Their consistent performance in big games needs to be relative to what their performance is against the Stanfords, against the Syracuses of the world, and that's going to be something that they will have to take a bump with this upcoming season. Brian, you mentioned it earlier, most telling matchups, they kick off the season against two of the better offensive line units in the entire country, let alone on Notre Dame's schedule. We're not going to have to wait that long to find out how this defensive line is going to start performing.
Yeah, and I don't know that they got to play elite football in those first two games, but they got to hold their own.
Yep. If
they play elite football, great. Notre Dame's 2-0. I mean, it's just kind of how it is. You just got to hold your own. That's it. I don't need them to look like vintage prime, like when Riley was really rolling. I don't need anybody just do your job and do it hard and do it consistently. Like, you're going to need that the first two games. And we're like you said, Trev, that's going to be the tough test, because we talked about it, I believe, also with the defensive ends. It's the same story. If you don't play well those first two games, I don't really care if you dominate your next 10. I'm still going to have questions about how good you are until we get – I mean, look, okay, they're good, but can they Can they do that against Ohio State this week in the playoff? Can they do that against Texas and Oregon or Penn State or Alabama or Georgia or whoever you're playing in the playoff? Can they do it then? Because the teams you're playing after Texas A&M are not those teams. And so you don't have to dominate. You don't have to look like world beaters. You don't have to look like you're the next, the second coming of Bryant Young or Lewis Nix or anybody like that. You just have to show me that you are there to battle and to do your job and do it at a high level and just hold your own, make some clutch plays, and just play good football. Then after that, it gets down to where are they down the stretch? Like, are they in a position where they are peaking late in the season? I think the beginning and end for this position especially are going to be vitally important because they're going to need this group to help put games away in November. When it's colder, I mean, you're going to be playing in Boston, you're going to be playing in Pittsburgh, you're going to be playing in South Bend. There's no getaway warm game this year. I mean, even Stanford at the end of the year, it can get chilly in Northern California in late November. I've been in Stanford a few times. Ange and I, one time, we were down by the wharf, and I'm like, I wish I would have brought a jacket because I'm freezing right now because it gets that wind off of the
it's
the
never
water.
warm in Stanford.
It's
like
not
warm,
Southern
warm.
Cal.
Right, exactly.
It's a different animal. So
yeah.
But the point is that beginning and that end stretches are going to tell us a lot. And not that the middle doesn't matter, but the end stretch is telling us, are they peaking as you get ready to head into the postseason? So that's where when I look at it, that's what I see.
So guys, we get to this question a lot with every position breakdown that we do. What is a successful season to you guys when it comes to this particular position group, the defensive tackles? Is it stats? Is it what is it, Brian?
It's 2 words.
Okay.
Healthy.
Yeah.
Consistent.
There you go.
That's a successful season. Now, a great season is more pressure, more tackles for loss, more pressures, more. But I just think the biggest thing is if this unit is healthy and consistent, then the talent, Trev, takes care of itself. And you can take it a different direction if you want. But for me, I'm going to give coach speak on this one because it's true. I just need you to bring it every week. I need you to be locked in every week. That's it. Because if Jason Onye is locked in every week and he's on the field every week and he plays consistently, he's going to be a difference maker. If Gabriel Rubio just answers the bell every week and he's just consistent every week, I promise you it won't be consistently average. That's not his talent level. So that's why just by and large from this group, I need you to be healthy and consistent. That's it for me.
Yeah, I definitely see that in the same light. I just took it a step further and I just said I didn't put any numbers behind it, but I just said shared production. When I look at the makeup of this room, they don't have, as of June 26, a Riley Mills proven commodity. I've said that a lot this show. But what they do have is a plethora of depth that they can go to and utilize. Now, last season, it was a little bit too much. Really, the last 2 seasons, in 23 and 24, it was too much of Mills or Cross. Very rarely was it Mills and Cross when we talk about the impact of the defensive tackles in Notre Dame's defensive line room. A successful season for me is I am very much banking on the waves that they can come at you. They can throw at you Onye and Rubio and Heinisch and Dawson and Hughes and Dixon and Sevillano and all these guys. I don't want there to be any sort of drop-off. Of significant drop-off. I mean, if they put in Davian Dixon, who's a true freshman, I'm not going to expect him to go out and do what Jason Onye does as a 5th-year guy. But with that being said,
that was an issue in 2012, though. I mean,
it was
when you went from Lewis Nix to Tony Springman. That was a big drop-off.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And so when I talk shared production, I just mean more of a collective group effort. I don't want to walk away and we're sitting there on a Saturday night talking about, man, dude, Gabe Rubio was a dog today, but what happened to Jason Onye today? I want to talk about them as a collective group.
Vince, do you remember there were times in 2022, and Trevor, I'm curious if you remember this from watching the show back then, but do you remember we would complain like, dude, it was like we would look at each other in the press box, be like, do you see us on the field? It's the number 2 D line. And you just watch the team go right down the field.
Oh, yeah.
Got real. Yeah.
And there were two issues with that. Number one is, why do you have the entire second team defensive line on the field?
Right. Why did they ever split it? Like, that was
that was
frustrating.
Dumb, number one. But then number two was there was a drop-off in talent from the first team, second team. There's not as big of a drop-off or any drop-off in talent. You could argue that the guy that right now we would project to be the number 5 defensive tackle in this lineup is the most talented player on the roster at that position. But to your point, Trev, it's like you can't have that drop-off where you have to play your starters more snaps because you don't trust in big games your number 2s to give you the same level of play and performance. And that is I like that idea, that shared production, because the only way you're sharing production is if you're sharing snaps. And the only way you're sharing snaps is if you're playing consistently and you're answering the bell every week and you're playing to your potential, to where it's no longer if Jason Onye can do this, or if Gabriel Rubio can do this, or if Armel Mukam can do this, or if Jared Dawson can do this. It's, hey, did you see Jason Onye do that? Did you see Armel Mukam do that? Did you see Gabriel Rubio do that? That's when it becomes. And the potential's there. The tools are there. I think the desire's there. I think Jason Onye and Gabriel Rubio both have opportunities to walk away from this thing and go somewhere else where it would be easier if they wanted to. They didn't. They saw it through. And I'd love to see those young men both get rewarded for. Look, we all go through stuff in life. We all, as young people, made, heck, as a 40-something-year-old, to make dumb decisions. And I have been redeemed for those in a life sense, but same thing in football. I love redemption stories, and those two kids both have an opportunity to do that this year, and it's going to help the football team in a big, big way if they can. You ready for bold predictions?
I was just going to say, Justin was kind of jumping the gun here. He put this in. He's like, bold predictions, question mark.
Always at the end, brother.
We got
Always
you.
at the end.
Don't worry, man. We got you. So
okay.
It is that time in the show where we are going to do bold predictions. And since I'm talking right now, I'm going to go first because I don't know that mine's all that bold, but I'm going to stay on the Jason Onye hype train here a little bit. And he had 1.5 sacks last year. Now, I know that it was in limited duty for obvious reasons, but I think he's got all of the makings of having a breakout season. I think he has 5+ sacks this year. So I'm going 5+ sacks for Jason Onye is my bold prediction.
Well, just real quick, Vince, if he would have played the entire season and played all 16 games at that rate, that's 5 sacks.
So like not that bold,
but it's bold because he's never shown that he can do that. He's never answered the bell
season.
So right, exactly.
Yeah. So it's kind of predicting that he's going to have that breakout season and be consistent the entire season. So 5+. Trevor, why'd you go?
I don't have any numbers tied to mine. Mine is more big picture. And I think that the defensive tackle unit this year, once we kind of look back, say we're sitting here in February and we talk about the impact that they had week over week, I think they're going to have a bigger impact and a more consistent. Well, I think they're going to have a bigger impact because it will be more consistent than what last year's defensive tackle unit was, despite how good Riley Mills was down the stretch. So my bold prediction is, however you want to take it, we're sitting here in February, the season's over. We confidently say the 2025 defensive tackle group played better and were more effective than what last year's was, despite losing Howard Cross, who was a preseason All-American, and Riley Mills, who played very much like an All-American down the stretch.
All right. I'm going to actually be bold here. And here's my bold prediction. So last year, the Notre Dame defensive tackles had 22.5 tackles for loss and 18.5 sacks. So my bold prediction is Notre Dame goes over 30 tackles for loss from the defensive tackle position. They also get more sacks than they had. They get more total pressures and sacks this season as a unit than they did last season.
Love it.
That's my bold prediction. So they're over 30 and over 20.
Okay.
And also have more pressures
than
they did a year ago. Now, that could get negated by Chris Ash doesn't have play a very aggressive defense, but
and that is a question mark.
I don't think that that's going to be the case. So I'm going with a big jump in production, especially against the run from the defensive tackles.
That's going to be the key right there. Because like I said, Brian, you and I have been talking about run production from the defense. I feel like for years,
and it got a lot better under Al Golden.
Sure.
It still wasn't great.
Exactly. And again, some of that was scheme. Some of that was game planning. There were games.
Some of that was, I dare you to run. I'll let you run.
That's exactly right.
That's what we want you to do.
Right. That's exactly right. That was my point. Is like he allowed it, but it doesn't make me feel any better.
But there were some times where he didn't allow it, and teams enforced. I mean, he didn't allow Penn State to run on in the first half. They just whooped Notre Dame's butt in the first half on the edge.
Right.
They didn't allow Ohio State to run the ball.
No.
For a 70-yard gain in the third quarter. I mean, they just got their butt whooped up front. You are absolutely correct.
Right. All right. Well, that's going to do it for our defensive tackle preview for the 25 season. And we are going to keep matriculating our way through the offense and the defense. Next week, we'll have, offense on Tuesday, defense on Thursday. And it's fair. It's fair. All right. Thanks, D-Troll Hunter. I appreciate you, man. But no, we are going to continue going through the roster and predicting everything until we get up to fall camp. And so you're going to stay locked in to Irish Breakdown because we're going to continue bringing the heat. So you definitely want to do that. And of course, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. All kinds of intel over there. And as I've mentioned before, the dominoes keep falling and there's more to fall. So you're going to want to stay locked in. You're going to hit that notification bell. You're going to want to subscribe and all of those different things so that you can stay locked into Irish Breakdown because we will give you the backstory. We will give you the intel. We will give everything that you need, but you got to stay locked in to Irish Breakdown in all forms and fashions. So the first step is to get onto the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Before we jump into the final part of our show, which will be a running back preview for the entire country, we do have a super chat, Brian, and we want to bring that up because it's from my man, Connor.
Who only is ever on the show when Vince is on the show.
I'm just saying. Connor, I appreciate you, my man. Thank you very much for the super chat. He says, I have to give my annual congrats to all the educators and administrators in IB Nation. Happy end of the school year. Connor, that hits me close to home, and I appreciate you, and it's incredibly sad.
That's why Vince is on the show.
Summer is almost half over. Trevor and I were talking about that during our pregame, and I can't believe that June is almost over. Like, what is happening? But no, Connor, I appreciate you, and I appreciate all the teachers and administrators out there doing their due diligence, and hopefully you're all getting your batteries recharged right now and getting ready for fall, which is going to be here before you know it, which also is, by the way, our favorite time of the year, right, Trevor?
Oh, it sure is. Sure is. Another bold prediction for Vince. School starts again in August.
Oh.
Going back to work. So
yeah, gotta love it. Gotta love it. But no, Connor, I appreciate you very much. Thanks for hanging out with us, and thanks for the super chat, my man. All right, guys. So we are going to jump into our college football topic for today. And said college football topic is running backs. And we're going to do something kind of fun. So Trevor and Brian have been meticulously going through every single roster in Division I college football.
Well,
I mean, just saying, right?
Not everybody. I'm not like, okay, does Texas State have a top 10 running back room? Like, there are some G5s I looked at, but
it's true. You did.
I'm not watching film of like every South Alabama's running back room. You know?
But they have been letting their fingers do the walking, going through the rosters, figuring things out, and they are going to give two lists today. So it's kind of double the fun. So we're going to do top 5 individual running backs in the entire country. And we're going to talk about them. We're going to break them down. We're going to do Trevor's and we're going to do Brian's. And there's some intermingling there on those lists. And then in part 2 of today's show, they are going to put out their top 10 running back rooms in college football. Same idea. Trevor's got a list. Brian's got a list. We're going to break it down. We're going to go through it. There are some copies, and then there are some differences, and that's what makes these lists so much fun. So we're just going to jump right into this thing, and we are going to have a lot of fun with this. So, you guys ready to jump on into this thing?
Yeah, I'm excited. This is going to be a really fun year at running back.
Yeah,
because I don't know that there's a lot of like star running backs beyond like a couple guys, but there's a lot of really good backs in college football this year. Some are established and some are sort of, we're predicting. There's a lot of guys I'm like, dude, I can't put this guy on my list, but he's going to be really good, you know, or I don't have this running back room on my list, but this is really good. And the portal has really quietly impacted running back rooms in a much bigger way than it gets talked about. And in Notre Dame's schedule, obviously part of that as well, but our focus is just not, it's not a Notre Dame show. It's we're breaking down college football.
It's for the college football landscape.
But little things like the ACC is sneaky good at running back this year. Like, it's not getting a lot of talk, but I'm like, dude, there aren't a lot of teams in the ACC that don't have a potential good running back this season coming back, either a transfer in, a guy that's kind of emerging, or like in Duke's case, a kid that was hurt kind of most of last year that's coming back, who was a pretty darn good player the year before, and the Moore kid. So that was interesting. A lot of transfers impacting the Big 12 running back rooms, you know, and then the SEC, it's like there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of projection needed in the SEC, but there's a lot of potential. There's some young backs. There's a couple rising sophomores that could have some say. There's a couple underrated groups. So, you know, Trev, this was a lot harder, and you and I discussed this. The top 5 and the top 10, the top 5 players in the top 10 units, was not an easy thing to do out beyond the top 2 to 3 of both groups. And it's not because, well, after the top 3, there's nobody good. It's like there's just a lot of good running backs and a lot of good running back rooms in college football this year, which made this a really fun statistical study and film study. Like, I went to B-Dubs yesterday. I took my wife to her massage and then went and sat at B-Dubs, and I'm like just doing film breakdowns and data research the whole time, you know, and it was a ton of fun. And because it's like, there's a lot of good backs in college football this year. Not a lot of elite backs, but just a lot of good college running backs. I don't know how many of what they are in NFL draft or whatever else. I don't care. This is college football.
Yeah, this isn't that show. This is not the NFL draft show.
And that's fine. I mean, I watch those shows. It's just that just because you're not an NFL draft prospect doesn't mean you're not a darn good football player in college.
Exactly.
100%. And there's just a lot of those guys. Like some of the guys we're talking about, they're not NFL guys, but they're going to be good college football players, either starters. There's a lot of teams with like really good number 2s this year too. Like, there's a lot more 1-2 punches in college football now than I've seen in a long time. And that's what I think is going to make this fun.
Trevor, before we get to your list, because we're gonna put your top 5 list up first, but I want to know, did you have trouble putting the top 5 together? Was it an easy thing to put the top 5 together? You know, were you wrestling with some things? Like, where are you at with putting your list together? I just want to get a little preview.
My top 5 was definitely easier to put together than my top 10.
Okay.
Because at least with my top 5 guys,
I'm top 5 players is better than your top 10 room. Yeah.
Yeah, because at least with the top 5 individual players, I'm looking at just their stats. Whereas when I'm looking at rooms as a whole, like, you know, spoiler alert, I have a team in my top 5 running back rooms in the country, and I don't have one of their players, any one of them, in my top 5 running backs in college football. Now, they're on my breakout list, players to watch, but that's what's tough, is balancing, okay, what makes the room a top 10 room and what makes the guy a top 5 guy. And so that was hard to balance.
Because we have a top 5 back that we both have the same top 5 backs.
Yep.
Just not quite the same order. But one of the guys in our top 5, it is not part of a running back room that ranks in our top 10, nor for me did it even come close. It was kind of closer for you, Trev, but like, that was interesting because, like you said, just because you have the top back doesn't mean you have a top room, unless you have, like, I mean, obviously, if Boise State's running back room was one of the best in college football last year, they didn't need a second back.
Yeah.
You know, but for some teams, it's like your number one necessarily, like your room is maybe not as strong, even though that guy is better. But those 2 rush for more than your 2. So, like, you could have a top back, but another team had, you know, and your top back goes for 1,200, and then your next back goes for, like, this is how it was in Notre Dame when Darius Walker went, you know, back-to-back years with over 1,000 yards. Like, the next highest guy in both of those years didn't run for a lot of yards. You know what I mean? Especially since Raekwon Sean Powers-Neal got injured. But like in 2005, for example, Darius Walker rushes for 1,196 yards. Notre Dame only had 2 other players go for 100 yards or more. You had Travis Thomas at 248 and Sean Powers-Neal at 100. That's it. And so then you add it up, like, well, that's only like 1,400 yards. You could have a running back room with 3 guys and none of them go for 1,000, but they have 600 more yards than your running back room. And that's kind of the point. Saw the same thing in 2006 where Darius Walker runs for 1,267 and they only had one other back, James Alders, go for over 80 because he had 142. Like, so, yeah, you had a 1,200-yard runner. You think, oh, it's a great room. No, he's a good back, but your room was kind of nothing after him. And so that's why there's a difference between, and a lot of people, Trev, we see a lot of these rankings in magazines, and it's essentially the running back room is essentially the 10 best running backs, essentially. And I don't think that's what constitutes a great room per se. It just, those are the individually best players. And that was an intriguing part of it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Finding out that balance between top guy versus top room is interesting. This is going to be a fun one to dive into, but I'm ready to start breaking down my top 5. This one's going to be a fun one to dive into.
No doubt. No doubt. So without further ado, I mean, Brian kind of put it out there that you guys have the same 5 guys, but they're all in a different order. So that'll be kind of an interesting piece to this as well. But we're going to roll out Trevor's list first. And what we're going to do is we're going to do how we usually do these lists. We're going to start at the bottom and we're going to work our way up to the top. And so since this is a top 5 list, we're going to start at 5. Brian and Trevor, your number 5 back is...
He thinks he's funny.
Dang, I was trying to do like a little drum roll, trying to get the anticipation up, and my IT guy failed me.
Yeah, he did. He did. You ready, Trev?
Always.
I'm bringing it up when you start talking about him. I don't want to give it away.
Oh, okay. My apologies. That's
well, okay. Hey, I don't take anybody's moment, Trevor, even yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you.
This is your news to break, brother, not mine.
Fair enough. Well, Brian mentioned it at the start of this segment that the ACC has a lot of sneaky good running backs this season. And 3 of my 5 top running backs live in the ACC. Number 5 for me is Jamal Haynes at Georgia Tech. Now, you go through and you look at what he did last season. He didn't go over 1,000 yards. That's going to ding him a lot for some other people. I don't really carry that much weight into that. I don't think you have to be an 1,000-yard rusher to be an effective running back. But you go and you look what he did. You guys know me. I carry a lot of weight into what players do in big games. We're talking about somebody who he played 567 snaps last year. He has 25 career starts, 944 rushing yards, 5.6 yards per carry, 9 rushing touchdowns. But you go and you break down some of the bigger games that he played in. He went for, in the opener in Ireland against Florida State, 11 for 75 and 2 touchdowns. Now, yes, Florida State ended up not being good. I would make the argument that the Florida State team on August 24th when they played in Dublin, Ireland, was a little bit different than the one Notre Dame faced, I believe, on November 3rd.
And it was also, in his head, was still a big game.
Absolutely. You go through and you look what he did against North Carolina, ripped off a 68-yard game winner, 19 carries for 170 yards, 2 touchdowns against Georgia in that crazy overtime. Literally.
Yeah.
You know, and the week before, he went for 19 for $128, averaged 6.7 yards per carry against Miami. Now everybody's going, well, he only had 3 carries. Yeah, for 83 yards and a touchdown against Miami, the number 4 team in the country at that point in time. On the road against Georgia in Athens, 13 carries, 91 yards, averaged 7 yards a carry. Everybody, yes, I understand the game went into overtime, but if you guys remember, first of all, overtime only starts on the 25-yard line in college, and Haynes King had a lot of their total yardage in that overtime. Well, I remember what Notre Dame's rushing attack looked like against Georgia, and none of their running backs went for 13 for 91. And so that was a really impressive performance, and they capped it off in a bowl game against Vanderbilt, 17 carries, $136 on the ground. So Jamal Haynes is my 5th running back in here. Really like what he's doing. Actually, 3 of my 5. My 4th guy is somebody on Notre Dame.
Real quick, Trev, he got hurt against Miami.
Yeah.
He only played 5 snaps that game. And in 5 snaps, he had 83 yards rushing on 3 carries.
Yeah.
He was banged up a lot last year as well.
My fourth guy on this list also resides in the ACC. It's Desmond Reed from Pitt. Now, he is somebody, again, electric playmaker. 966 rushing yards, 5.3 yards per carry, 5 rushing touchdowns. As a receiver, he totaled 52 receptions, 579 yards, 11.1 yards per catch, and 4 receiving touchdowns. He was the team's second leading receiver as the starting running back last year. So he's coming into I believe his third year as a starter. He has 18 career starts. He played 607 snaps in 2024, but he is an electric playmaker, guys. And you could say some of the same things about him, like what I said about Jamal Haynes. Big moments on the road against SMU, 49 rushing yards, 1 touchdown, 44 receiving yards. Against Clemson, 68 rushing yards, 108 receiving yards off of 10 receptions. Then against Toledo in the bowl game, unfortunately, they lost 33 carries, $169 on the ground, then 1 rushing touchdown. Desmond Reed is going to be a very dangerous threat that Notre Dame is going to be facing down the stretch of this season. But he, as what Brian alluded to earlier, he pretty much carries the weight of Pittsburgh's running back room. But it's a pretty big weight because Desmond Reed is a darn good football player, man. My top 3, before I reveal who my third guy is, really between 1 and 2, because Brian and I have the same players on this list. But look, guys, the top 3 guys, top 2 guys have an argument to be in either spot. But when I talk about Isaac Brown at Louisville, he is somebody that burst onto the scene as a true freshman. I mean, he really impressed me last year with what he was able to do, and he carries the weight of pretty good sized weight of what Louisville was able to do on the ground last year. But he played in all 13 games, started 9 of them, and I believe he started the final 6 games of their season last year. 389 snaps, 1,100-yard rusher, 7.1 yards per carry, 11 rushing touchdowns. You go back and you break down what he did in some of his bigger games that he played in. Against Notre Dame, really good defense. Rush defense a little questionable, but on the road against Notre Dame, 13 rushes, 72 yards. Against Miami, 9 carries, 56 yards, 1 touchdown. Against SMU, he had 117 yards on the ground. He gave Clemson's defense a heck of a time. On the road in Death Valley, 20 carries, $151 on the ground, 1 touchdown. On the road against Kentucky, rivalry game in the SEC, 26 carries, 178 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, average 6.8 yards per carry. Isaac Brown is joining a backfield and an entire running back room that is very loaded heading into this year. But they don't have the sexy, like we're in the SEC, we're in the Big Ten. I think that's why some other lists are sleeping on them. Us here at Irish Breakdown are not sleeping on Louisville's backfield.
No.
Because, man, it is dynamic.
Yeah.
It is absolutely dynamic. My second guy is Nicholas Singleton at Penn State. I go through and I look at him, and he is somebody that has been doing this for quite some time. He has 27 career starts, played 540 snaps last season. He's a part of a loaded backfield for Penn State. Last year, he had 172 carries, 1,099 yards, 6.4 yards per carry, 12 rushing touchdowns. And he also added 375 yards on the ground, or through the air, and then 5 receiving touchdowns. I think he carries a little bit more of the weight for Penn State's running back room, more so than what Katron Allen does. That's why I don't have him in my top 5. But we're talking about a kid that rushed for 3 touchdowns and scored the only touchdowns for Penn State in the Orange Bowl, and arguably could have had a 4th if he didn't drop that one little flat route on the goal line. But you go and you look at what he's been able to do in bigger games. He averaged 7.3 yards per carry against Boise State in a touchdown, averaged 6.4 yards per carry against SMU at home in a touchdown. In the Big Ten championship game against Oregon, 10 carries, 105 yards, 43 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Now, he had some performances earlier in the year, a little bit shaky. He didn't have a 100-yard rushing performance after they played Bowling Green, but again, the dichotomy in that running back room, they share.
He saved his next 100-yard game for a pretty big moment, though.
Yeah,
that was one of the weirdest stats I saw last year, Trev, when I was doing research on top backs. Nicholas Singleton had a 100-yard game in his first 2 games, West Virginia, Bowling Green, and then did not get 100 yards again until the Big Ten title game.
Yeah,
and he did that on 10 carries. And then he was 84 to 90 in the next 3 games. So you talk about being good in the biggest moments. That was certainly what Nicholas Singleton did last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then taking us home, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one because I think it's a pretty much a given, but Jeremiah Love is my number 1 running back in the country. And I fall in line with, I'm sure, everybody in the chat, everybody else on the show with me, and the majority of the people throughout college football that cover it. I mean, Jeremiah Love was special. He is going to build off of what he did last year. 1,125 rushing yards, 17 rushing touchdowns, averaged 237 through the air, and 2 receiving touchdowns. So that is my top 5 list, and it makes for an interesting kind of dynamic when we break into our top 10 running back rooms. But as far as individual players, this is who I have as my top 5.
Yeah, we're in the same page, Trev. We have the same list. I give my number 5. I have Desmond Reed at number 5. There are probably 10 more better pure runners than Desmond Reed.
Yeah.
You could get into a lot of the guys that I'm going to talk about after we kind of go through this. We're gonna dive into sort of some of the guys that were left off of our list that were hard to keep off, and there's guys that are better just pure runners of the football than Desmond Reed. But as you pointed out, what makes him so good is that fact that he's so good at everything. And I don't even include his return game production as part of this ranking. This is just about what they do as running backs. And to your point, 52 catches for 579 yards. Of the top 5 backs that you and I have, nobody had more total yards than Desmond Reed. Nick Singleton was next at 1,474, but Desmond Reed had 1,545 total yards last year, rushing and receiving. And you had 1,110 from Jamal Haynes, 1,474 from Nick Singleton, 1,325 from Isaac Brown, and 1,362 from Jeremiah Love. So the production was outstanding, and he's a very dynamic back, all-around back. He's the best, in my opinion, all-around back in college football when you look at what he can do as a runner and as a passer. And I would like to see them use him a little bit, just a little bit more in the run game this year at times. At times they would kind of get away from him, but he's also not a real big guy, so you can't like bulk carry him either. And they're going to need to find somebody to take a little bit of the burden off of him. Number 4 on my list is Jamal Haynes. This ranking is not based on necessarily what they did last year alone. We're using what they've done in the past to evaluate how we're projecting them into this season. Jamal Haynes was banged up a lot last year. He was not healthy last year. And I've been very high on and look, I'll be honest, this could be a bit of a bias, but I've been very high on Jamal Haynes for 2 years. And I believe he was my first team all-opponent running back last year, I believe. But even with the issues last year of being banged up, you had Haynes King gets knocked out, then everybody's focus is kind of on him. When Haynes King wasn't out against Notre Dame, the outcome was not going to be different as a team. But when you look at what happened against Notre Dame last year with Jamal Haynes, once Haynes King went out, Notre Dame was able to kind of focus all their attention on them. And they also had a lot of offensive line injury issues last year, too. Their starting left tackle went out early in the season. And Georgia Tech's not putting in the kind of players that some other people did. So, and again, you guys got to stop looking at this as just who had the most rushing yards. This is about impact players. And so, like, for example, somebody says, why isn't Kaytron Allen on there? Because Kaytron Allen carried the ball a bunch. Like Trev had a great example. Like he's like if Tony Jones had 220 carries, he was at 5 yards a carry. So just because you have yards doesn't mean you're a great back, and we'll get more into that. But Jamal Haynes, to me, you put Jamal Haynes behind the Penn State offensive line last year, and he doesn't need 220 carries to get to 1,000 yards. He's going to be at 1,300 or so if he gets there, and that's exactly the thing we're talking about. And I think he's poised to have, if they're healthy, a big year. And they don't have to necessarily wear on him the way that they did last year, because I like the running back room, which we'll get to later. But I like Jamal Haynes a lot. I think he's a guy that can be a big play guy. He can be a hammer back. You know, they used him more out of the backfield last year in the check down game. I think that, you know, I'd like to see them use him a little bit more in the throwing game this year. But I'm a big Jamal Haynes fan. Speed, elusiveness, runs with authority. And like you said, Trev, he had some big moments and some big games last season as well. So, and that's something that I look at, ran really well against Duke, ran really well against North Carolina, ran well against Georgia, ran well against Vanderbilt. He's a very good football player. My number 3 on my list is actually Nicholas Singleton. Now, I think Nicholas Singleton was a better back than Isaac Brown last year, but I think Isaac Brown will be a better back than Nicholas Singleton this year when you count his third year. I think Nicholas Singleton is the best back at Penn State, and I don't think it's overly close.
No.
And you can look at rushing yards and say, okay, well, Katron Allen had more rushing yards than he did last year. Yes, he did. He had 9 more yards than Nicholas Singleton. So he had 1,108, and Nicholas Singleton had 1,099. Correct? Nicholas Singleton averaged 6.4 yards a carry. He did that on 48 fewer carries. So he had 48 fewer carries, but only had 9 fewer yards. And at the end of the season, also, when you consider that Nicholas Singleton had 41 catches, he's also a very good dual threat all-around back. I think that Desmond Reed's the best all-around back. The reason that I think Nicholas Singleton's number 2, the reason I have Nicholas Singleton as higher on this list is because I think there's a significant difference between them as runners. And I think Nicholas Singleton is definitely a more pure runner. And he was banged up at times last year as well. That's why his carries at times in the middle of the season weren't as great, is because I think they were just trying to nurse him through the season and get him through the season, and you let your bigger back kind of go. He got banged up against Illinois, did not play against UCLA, and then the next 5 games, he only had 26, 49, 15, 45, and 40 yards. That was when he was banged up. Prior to getting injured, Nicholas Singleton was at 114, 119, 81, and 94, and he was averaging about 8 yards a carry. Gets hurt. The next 5 games or so, he goes for 2.6, 4.1, 2.5, 6.4, 5.7, 4.9. Then he got a little bit healthier. And in the last 5 games, as he got healthier and healthier, last 5 games, 87, 105, 90, 87, and 84 total yards. Also went for 6.7, 10.5, 6.4, 7.3, and 5.6 yards per carry. So there's this very big difference in the middle of the season, and it wasn't even against good teams. It was against USC, Wisconsin, Washington, Purdue. The only good team they played was Ohio State, and he was definitely not 100% in that game. So, but then against Oregon, SMU, Boise, and Notre Dame, he goes and plays very well. And as I mentioned, he's also an impactful player in the pass game. He had 2 catches for 33 yards against Notre Dame. He also had 4 catches for 43 yards against Oregon. So against Oregon, the number 1 team in the country, in the Big Ten title game, he touched the ball 14 times for 147 yards. That's a darn good football player. And so that's why he is on my list. I think Isaac Brown is I just think he's going to be just an absolute monster this year. Love this kid. Explosive, great vision, can catch the ball. I think that part of his game is going to get ramped up a little bit this year. But, Trev, you talked about it. As a true freshman, 1,173 yards, 7.1 yards per carry, 11 touchdowns. He had 117 yards against SMU on 10 carries. He had 72 yards on only 13 carries against Notre Dame. Also had 4 catches for 23 yards and a touchdown receiving against Notre Dame. So he was just under 100 yards against Notre Dame on just 17 touches, including a touchdown. He also had 20 carries for 151 yards and a touchdown against Clemson, 7.6 yards per carry in that game. Absolutely torched Clemson in that game. And then, of course, he went for 26 for 178 yards and 2 touchdowns against Kentucky, which is their big rivalry game. So this is a true freshman that in their big rivalry game at the end of the year goes out there and carries the ball 26 times and then goes for 18 for 99. And I thought outplayed Jonah Coleman in that game. And Jonah Coleman's a very good running back for Washington. Now, you got to take some of that outplayed with a grain of salt because he wasn't running against the same defense that Jonah Coleman was running against, but he just was the better player that day. But you look at it, this is year 1, fellas. Year 1 for him. He went for 6.2 per carry against Miami. It wasn't like fluky where he beat up a lot of bad teams. He had 2 games where he combined for 10 yards against Georgia Tech and Stanford. So like he only carried the ball 2 times for 3 yards against Stanford and a game they lost. So I think he's a big time back, explosive back. He's a ton of fun to watch also. And then, of course, my number 1 back is Jeremiah Love. Reasons for this, it's production. Jeremiah Love is going to have, production that's going to be outstanding this year. It's also about effectiveness and just being an elite overall player. When you look at the 5 backs that I have in my top 5, Isaac Brown's at 7.1 yards per carry. Jeremiah Love is right there at 6.9. Then there's a half a yard drop off between the next guy, Nicholas Singleton at 6.4, Jamal Haynes at 5.6, Desmond Reed at 5.3. I mean, everybody's going to talk about, Mekhi Hughes and at Tulane. And my whole thing with Mekhi Hughes is why he's not on my list. And this is kind of transitioning to the next segment of guys on the list. I like Mekhi Hughes. I think he's a good running back. I think that's going to be a good pickup for Oregon. I think he's going to put up numbers there. But this is a guy that averaged 5.3 yards per carry at Tulane, compared to a guy at Notre Dame that averaged 6.9, a guy at Georgia Tech in a Power 5 league that averaged 5.6. And we have a comparison. I mean, he put up good rushing numbers. He had 14.01 this year, or last year he had 13.78 as a freshman. He averaged 5.3 yards per carry both years. The year before that, they had Tajay Sharp at running back, who ran for 1,581 yards, averaged 6.9 yards per carry, or Tajay Spears, excuse me. And then the year before that, Tajay Spears averaged 6.7 yards per carry. So I just think he's a good back. He would be in my top 10, but he's not a top 5 back like people are making him out to be. If Mekhi Hughes was at Iowa State, if he transferred to Iowa State from Tulane, I don't think he's getting the same kind of push that he's getting now. I think a part of this is he's going to Oregon. That's just kind of my opinion. Good back, good pickup. I love that pickup for Oregon. I think he'll fit that system well. He's just not a guy that's going to play at the level of some of these guys, in my opinion. So that, and there's several guys like that. Like, you can make a case. We talked about, Trev, you and I were talking about guys that we don't have on our list. Here's a guy that I think will end the season as a top 5 back, and that's Le'Veon Moss. And Trev and I had this battle because we both wanted to put him in the top 5, but here's why we didn't. The injury last year was late. And my worry is the uncertainty of where will he be as far as being not only healthy, but fully speed and back into game shape early in the year. And this is a consistent thing that we've done because it's like, we talk about this with Boubacar Traore. We talk about this with, guys at Notre Dame, where it's like, look, yeah, it'd be great to have, hey, just ignore the injury, not talk about the injury or anything like that. But the reality is you have to take into account. And I just need to see that Le'Veon Moss is what he was before the knee injury, before I can put him in top 5. If he's back to being the back he was last year, he'll be in his top 5. There's no doubt. That was the reason that I didn't have him, Trev. We can kind of spider this a little bit just as we talk about some of the other backs that we didn't have on this list that we really, it was either tough leaving this guy on, or I can't put him on now because he's got a lot to prove, but I won't be shocked if he's pushing for it as we get closer to the year or the end of the year.
Yeah, there's a handful of players for me that are on this list. One of them is one of my more favorite transfer portal pickups this offseason. That's Justice Haynes going to Michigan. Now, I need to see what he does at Michigan. He was a good running back at Alabama, but that offense last year is going through a scheme change. A lot of their rushing offense came from Jalen Milroe last year, but in the opportunities that he was given, I mean, Justice Haynes was a productive running back. I mean, he averaged 5.7 yards per carry. He had 7 rushing touchdowns. He was also splitting carries with Jam Miller, who I believe was their leading rusher out of the running back room last year. But in going into a more heavy run offense at Michigan, love that pickup. I don't know how close he's going to get to the top 5 in mine, depending on the type of season that he has. But given the state of the union of Michigan's receiving room going into this season, I'm going to just go out on a limb and say that they're probably going to be a run-heavy team this year as well. And I think that just –
Yeah. Did Trev freeze? I think Trev froze.
I think he did too.
I wonder if they're having some things. He was about to lay into one too, guys. But no, with Justice Haynes, he's one that I couldn't justify putting him in my top 5. because I'm not going to do that to him. Oh, let him get
just let him be mannequin style.
He's still down there frozen. But when I look at it with Justice, he's on my list too. And when you look at Michigan last year, or I should say Alabama last year, he was number 3 on the team in rushing. He had 448 yards. He averaged 5.7 yards per carry. Their leading rusher among the running backs was Jam Miller, who had almost twice as many carries as did Justice Haynes, 145 to 79, but he only had 120 more yards. He only averaged 4.6 yards per carry. I think it was a mistake that Alabama didn't use him more. And, I think it could be the case. And they are going to very much be a run-heavy team. And I think Justice fits their system really well. That's a part of it too, Vince. You could put a running back that needs to be in a gap scheme and you put him in an outside zone scheme, and he's not going to be as good of a back because his style doesn't fit that system as much. And then you could take a guy who's a great stretch running back and ask him to run counter and power all day, and he may not be as good of a back. And that's where with Justice Haynes. A couple other backs that I looked at, I think a Jaden Ott's going to have a bounce back year. I'm going to talk more about him in the unit breakdown, but I love Jaden Ott. His first 2 years at Cal, he's beat up last year, played behind a bad offensive line. I think he's going to be a lot better at Oklahoma this past year or this upcoming year. Darius Taylor from Minnesota is another guy that I like, Vince. He was banged up a lot in 2023, and I don't know that he was always healthy this past season. But, man, when he was on, he was on. He finished the year with 986 yards, only 4.8 per carry. I don't think he played behind a great offensive line. But, man, he had some moments last year. Missed the first game of the year. I don't think he was healthy early. A lot of his production early wasn't great. He had 124 yards against Nevada, but, didn't play against North Carolina. Only 4.6 per carry against Rhode Island, 3.4 against Iowa, 2.8 against Michigan, 1.9 against UCLA, but he got better as the year went on, had 300-yard games in his last 5 games. You look back to his freshman year in 2023 when he first battled injuries. Vince, he played 6 games that year, and in 4 of those games, he had at least 138 yards rushing, and in 3 of those 6 games, he had at least 193. So this kid's, only played 12 games last year, only played 6 games the year before, and he's already had 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 100-yard games. Like Darius Taylor is going to be a very good running back. He was a guy that he pushed to be on my list. So there's some really good backs. There's some other really good backs, but those are some guys that for me were really pushing to be on that list. There's a lot of other guys that I could see having breakout years to where. Mark Fletcher from Miami is a guy that I really like that could be a breakout. I like him and Jordan Lyles as a 1-2 punch. So those are some guys. Mekhi Hughes from Oregon is a good running back. He's a good running back. He's just not an elite running back, in my opinion. And then I've mentioned Jonah Coleman from Washington, who had he was over 1,000 yards this past year for the Huskies. He transferred in from Arizona, where he spent the prior year. He rushed for 871 yards, 6.8 yards per carry the year before. So this is a kid that's already got over 2,000 yards rushing in 2 years. He's another good back that I think is definitely in our conversation for top backs. So, yeah, there's a lot of good backs, Vince. And then there's a lot of other good backs that they're good backs, but they're not in consideration for being in the top 10. Like somebody asked me, why didn't you talk about Fernando Mendoza at quarterback? And I'm like, I like Fernando Mendoza, and I think he was a great pickup for Indiana, but there's one thing to be a good player, and it's nothing to be in the consideration for top 10, because that's the elite of the elite. Katron Allen is a borderline top 10 running back. Jadarian Price is a borderline top 10 running back as well. I'm just not as high on Katron Allen as some other people. I think he's a good back, but I just think that's it. He's a good back. That benefits from the system he plays in. So that's my list of my top 10 guys.
Okay. Well, we will let's transition here. So we'll give you the hit the like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell, all those fun things, and help us build up the CFB Nation site that the videos are on and the podcasts are on. Really appreciate you guys helping us out over there and getting us to where we need to be, and really appreciate it. And again, all we're asking for is your time. Hit that like button, the subscribe button, all those fun things, so that we can continue to bring you guys more exciting things when it comes to the big landscape of college football. That's the fun part about this particular channel. So any help you guys can give us is super appreciated. And we'll move on from there. So again, sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, that notification bell, and of course, share it with your family and friends. We'd really, really appreciate it. Well, first, we'd like to welcome back Trevor. Not sure what's going on down in Indianapolis.
We're the ones getting rain and thunder, and he's the one whose power is going out. And it's perfectly sun.
Seriously,
it's still out. I'm on my hotspot.
Look at you! Look at you!
We'll see. Apparently it's stuff's happening all across the city at certain areas. Like in my wife's where she works, their power went out. Like one of the restaurants around them, their power went out. I don't know if it's the heat. I don't know if
some rolling blackouts in old Indianapolis. There, unofficial rolling blackouts is what's going on.
It's rolling right now. You're looking good. I don't want to jinx it. You're looking good. So we'll attempt to just shove forward here. And go ahead, Brian. You have something?
Nope.
Okay, so this portion of the show is we are going to dive into the top 10 running back rooms across the country. So it's not just the backs anymore. We're not just going to take the top 10 backs and then just say where they came from and then put them on a list. Like that's not how this works. They actually, Brian and Trevor put these lists together by actually going through and looking at the depth of those rooms, the talent in those rooms, and then put together a top 10 list. And so I'm kind of excited to see where this thing's going to go. And so we're going to do it similar to the way we did it before.
And so it's not who has the most yards.
Right.
People get otherwise easy. It's just take the top 10 Power 5 rushers and just rank them 1 through 10 and how many yards they had. It's about your effectiveness, your dominance. And the way we looked at it is it's because it's like, okay, well, this guy averaged 5.3 yards per carry. I could use that as a statistic to back up a belief, but it may not be good context. So let's say I'm wrong about Mekhi Hughes and I'm talking about his 5.3 yards per carry. Say, well, yeah, but the Tulane O-line wasn't as good as it was under Tajay. I keep wanting to say Tajay Sharp, but it's Spears because Tajay Sharp's the kid that played receiver at UMass against Notre Dame back in 2015. But Tajay Spears, well, he played behind a better O-line. Well, maybe that's true, but the way that we look at this, looking at the stats, breaking the film down, it's if they all played behind the same offensive line in the same, like the same system, trying to look at it as objectively as possible. It's not just a raw number standpoint, but what is your talent? What is your production? Do they produce? Do they do things in different ways? Do they play well in big moments? All that type of stuff factors into this, into what constitutes a top room, as opposed to, like you said, Vince, just taking the top 10 running backs. Like they do this with quarterback, especially. Or the top quarterback rooms, and then they rank them. It's like 1 through 10 of who they think the top quarterbacks are.
Right.
It's not really about the room. We're trying to make it about the room, the unit as a whole is what we're going to dive into. And so, Trev, will let you start off. I'll do your 10 through 6, then I'll do mine, and then we'll go 5 through 1.
Yeah, so 10 through 6 was the harder one for me to kind of order in my list because there was a lot of teams that I felt could have gotten that number 10 spot. Man, it is up for debate. And that one, I think we're going to dive a little bit more into when we talk about teams that were left out of my list specifically. But at number 10 for me, I'm still going to go with Pitt. Now, I did mention when we went through the top 5 players list, Desmond Reed does carry a lot of the weight of what Pittsburgh's running back room is. But if you look at who all they have in total, they have Desmond Reed returning from last year. They also have Jules Goff coming back from last season. He only played in 3 games, played in 93 snaps, no stats to kind of write home about. One player that is interesting because of how Pittsburgh uses their running backs and how much they like to get them involved in the passing game. Because remember, Desmond Reed, 52 receptions, 579 yards, 11.1 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns last year as a running back. They brought in Justin Cook, who is actually a wide receiver at the D2 level. And they brought him in the transfer portal. Now he's 5'10", he's 180 pounds, but he is listed as a running back for Pitt. But over 3 seasons at the D2 level, 73 receptions, 965 yards, 13.2 yards per catch, 5 touchdowns. He is also a very dangerous returner. 1,600 return yards and 3 touchdowns in that same time span at that D2 school. I believe he went to East Stroudsburg. It's where he was a wide receiver at. And so What did those numbers tell me? I'm using a lot of projection here with this kid. I'm not saying he's going to end up being a top 5 back. Desmond Reed is still going to carry the weight of that running back room. But that tells me that this Justin Cook kid is dangerous with the ball in his hands. He's somebody that can make plays in the open space. And with how much Pittsburgh likes to utilize their running backs in the pass game, I think he could kind of elevate this room as a whole on top of what Desmond Reed is able to do with this group as well. But if somebody wants to argue another team for 10, I totally understand that completely. And so
there's a lot of good units. I mean, like, Trev, at the bottom of this list, it's like, I don't agree with your take here, but it's like you could find holes in a lot of these different rooms, and then also things that are really good about all these rooms too. My issue with Pitt was I just don't see anything other than Desmond Reed that I know. Whereas like there's other running back rooms that I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe they don't have a Desmond Reed, but their number 2 and their number 3 is better.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. The number 9 team on my list is Minnesota, team from the Big Ten. Now, heading into this season, they returned Darius Taylor from 2024. Now, it's not just him that makes this room interesting. What makes them interesting to me is some of their portal additions. Now, they added A.J. Taylor from the transfer portal. They also added a running back from Washington, Cam Davis. I'll get to him in a second. But Darius Taylor last year, he has 15 career starts. He played over 500 snaps last year. He rushed for 986 yards, 10 rushing touchdowns. Now, here's the rub. He did it on 205 carries, averaged 4.8 yards per carry. I wouldn't call him a receiving threat necessarily out of the backfield in the same light that I would talk about a Desmond Reed or a Nicholas Singleton, but he was productive out of the backfield. 54 receptions, 350 receiving yards, 6.5 yards per catch, 2 receiving touchdowns. It also sounds like my power kicked back on. Thank goodness. So there we go. But Darius Taylor, he kind of spearheads this running back room. Now, where it gets interesting is who they added in the portal. A.J. Turner from Marshall, 8 career starts, rushed for 864 yards last year, 8.3 yards per carry, 6 rushing touchdowns. He was number 2 in the country in yards per carry last season at 8.3 of running backs of over 50 carries. He was an impressive back last year. He was. Now, the third guy, a little bit of projection here, but Cam Davis, he transferred in from Washington. Limited carries in 2024 because he was coming back from a patellar tendon injury he suffered in 2023. Last year, he only had 44 carries for $190. But in 2022, he was kind of their short yardage back, their goal line type of running back, 107 attempts, 522 yards, 4.9 yards per carry, 13 rushing touchdowns in 2022 for Cam Davis. And so that was a really good addition by them. Number 8 for me is Georgia. Now, Georgia's in a spot where I'm, again, using a little projection here, but they need their running back room to return to what it was when they were more efficient on the ground. Now, even in the years where they were winning national championships, Georgia didn't have an 1,000-yard running back. So I'm not projecting a guy like Nate Frazier to have a 1,200-yard season. But as a true freshman last season, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, was Nate Frazier a true freshman last year? Okay.
Yep.
As a true freshman, played in 13 games, started 3 of them when Trevor Etienne was hurt, and he ended up leading the team, being the team's leading rusher outside of, I believe, rushing touchdowns, because I think Trevor Etienne had 1 more. But 133 attempts, 671 yards, 5.0 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns. Not too effective as a receiver. They just didn't use him that way.
Yeah, it was about usage, not so much they can't do it. It's just they didn't use him that way.
Exactly. Now,
they had a guy for that.
Yes.
Which leads to the effectiveness of their room.
Mm-hmm. Now, another portal addition that I like here, Josh McCray. They picked him up from Illinois. He played in all 13 games last year. He had 117 attempts, 609 yards, averaged 5.2 yards per carry, had 10 rushing touchdowns, also added a receiving touchdown to that. So 11 total touchdowns last year, adds to the depth in that room, as well as Cash Jones. He is more of their receiving back, going back to the usage of their room. Cash Jones only had 27 rushing yards last year, 1 rushing touchdown, but they had 275 receiving yards, averaged 11.5 yards per catch, 4 receiving touchdowns, including Georgia's only touchdown in the Sugar Bowl against Notre Dame. At number 7, I have Texas. They return Quintravion Wisner. They get CJ Baxter back from injury, and then they also have Jarrett Gibson kind of rounding out the bottom of that room. Now, Wisner, he had 12 starts last year, played in 15 games for Texas. He was in a 1,000-yard back, but he did it off of 226 carries, 4.7 yards per carry, 5 rushing touchdowns. As a receiver, 311 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown. Now, what kind of drives a lot of interest for me from this room is the return of CJ Baxter. He didn't play a snap in 2024. He was injured, but he played in 13 games as a true freshman. He started 6 of them. 4.8 yards per carry, 5 rushing touchdowns, 659 rushing yards. He is somebody that if he can kind of replace Jadon Blue in their running back rotation, Texas is kind of a team that has the most room to fall, I believe, on this list for me, because a lot is riding on the return of CJ Baxter for the room as a whole. Quintravion Wisner is a good college running back.
He not only has to return, he has to return and be better than he was before he got hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll talk more about that when I get to my breakdown of Texas, because you even have him higher than I do.
Yep. And but a lot is riding on CJ Baxter projecting to being a better running back than what he was as a true freshman, and that's coming off of an injury. A lot of questions there. And then, like I said, Jarrett Gibson rounds out the bottom of that group. He was the team's 3rd leading rusher last season. He had 377 yards, 4.8 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. He played in 15 games last season for the Longhorns. And then rounding out my 6 through 10, I have Oregon. They returned Noah Whittingham. They added Mekhi Hughes, who's been a hot topic of conversation so far in this segment. They picked him up from Tulane, and they also bring back Dewan Riggs, who only played in 2 games last season. But I like Noah Whittingham. He kind of was in the shadow of Jordan James last year, but he played in all 14 games. He had 540 rushing yards, averaged 4.6 yards per carry, 6 rushing touchdowns. Then he also added 308 yards through the air and then 2 receiving touchdowns as well. Mekhi Hughes is somebody that has gained a lot of offseason attention. 23 career starts. He rushed for 1,400 yards last year, 15 rushing touchdowns, but his efficiency as a runner isn't fantastic. It's 5.3 yards per carry. It's not horrible. I mean, I have other players on this list that are below 5 yards a carry, but based on where he was coming from, not the most yards per carry that he could have had, but he is returning the most rushing yards in college football since 2023 amongst returning players. He has 2,766 rushing yards as a returning player in college football. So carries some weight for me as well there. So that is my 6 through 10.
I've got Georgia as my number 10 room in the country. This is one that when I started my analysis, I did not anticipate having Georgia in my top 10. And the reason why is because their room wasn't very good last year. Part of that, though, was the line. They had a lot of injuries up front in the line that really limited their effectiveness. I don't think their run game was schemed very well. And when your line's not blocking and your quarterback is zero threat to kind of take some of the pressure off, I think that's going to hurt your ability to show off your ability. And I had to kind of get past some of that a little bit in order to feel better about this room. But number one, it starts for me. You mentioned Nate Frazier. That's where it starts for me. As a true freshman last year, 671 yards, 5.1 per carry, 8 touchdowns. I think he's a good football player, guys. I really do. I mean, you look at how he performed last season. I thought he was, good against Texas in the SEC title game on 11 carries, had a touchdown. He had the only, I think he only had the only big run that they had against Notre Dame. He had 4 carries for 37 yards against Notre Dame last season. They didn't use him a whole lot in the pass game. That doesn't bother me a whole lot, but I think Nate Frazier is going to really have a big year for Georgia. I think the talent's there. I think their line is going to be better, and I think he's a really good football player, and he was a really good high school player. You look at the rest of their lineup. You talk about the running back that they got in the portal from Illinois, gives you a really nice number 2 in Josh McCray, kid who had 609 yards, 10 touchdowns last year, also caught 13 passes. And then you get Roderick Robinson back, who gives you a really impactful back, only carried it 24 times last year, but he did average 8.2 yards per carry. And then you've got your third down specialist, kind of like their Aeneas Williams. He doesn't run it as well as Aeneas, but very impactful player in the pass game of Cash Jones. And that's not all. They got a couple other kids that were pretty highly ranked coming out of high school too. I think this backfield is better than maybe some of us give it credit for, certainly than I gave it credit for as I went into this process. I definitely did not think Georgia was going to be on my list when I started breaking it all down, but I really think Nate Frazier is going to have a breakout. The McCray pickup was good, excuse me, and I like the depth of the line. The success from a number standpoint is going to be dependent upon how the line plays, but I think if you put this room behind like a Notre Dame, behind a Texas A&M line, behind a Miami line, there's no doubt that they'd be productive. And this is one of those ones for me that is a definite projection of what I think they're going to be than it is an argument for what they've done. And that's just kind of where I am. So I'm kind of hedging my bet a little bit and going with the Bulldogs on this one. Next up on my list is Texas. Look, I think Texas has a good running back room. If you have one of the 10 best rooms in college football, you've got a good running back room. And so it's like saying, like with Mekhi Hughes, by saying Mekhi Hughes is not a top 5 running back, that's not me saying he stinks. It's me saying I don't think he's as good as other running backs. And he still is a good back. And that's how I feel about the Texas backfield. I think it's an overrated backfield nationally. You see people talking about their running back room as like top 2, like 3 or 4, like right behind Notre Dame. And I just don't see it, guys. I mean, you look last year, Wisner averaged 4.7 yards a carry. Jarrett Gibson comes back at 4.83 yards a carry. Now, that was freshman year, and I expect him to get better. But, and he did have a really good game against Florida when Wisner got banged up and got hurt. He had 4 carries for 0 yards that game before he got knocked out. And then Jarrett Gibson comes into the game, rushes for 100 yards on 16 carries. And so he's a guy that had 377 yards last year, and he did some things, didn't do a whole lot out of the pass game, only caught 3 passes. And then everybody talks about C.J. Baxter, and I think C.J. Baxter's a good back. But, again, this is a kid as a true freshman, talented player, rushed for 659 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's good production, right? Had 24 catches for 156 yards. Only averaged 4.78 yards per carry. I mean, there comes a point in time where your production is more about just your opportunity than it is your actual overall effectiveness. And I'm someone who puts a lot of value in what you do in big games, but then also what you do in, from a consistency basis. Well, with Gibson or Baxter, that can be a little difficult because I actually thought he did have some pretty big moments as a freshman. Had 9 carries for 64 yards and a touchdown, had a big long run against Washington in the semifinal game. And had a nice performance against Kansas in the regular season. And then there's some other times he didn't. So it's a projection. And also he's coming back from a pretty significant knee injury. And I just think the other 2 backs are good backs, but not great backs. It's really, and none of their 3 backs are sniffing the top 10 for me. I don't care what anybody, I see Wisner in top 10 running back lists. And I'm thinking that's just because he plays at Texas. That's the only reason you have him there. He's a nice, solid back, but he's not what people make him out to be. This is a good room, but that's it. And, Trevor, I think you nailed something. If there's any group in here that I predict to get bumped out during the season, it's Texas. And not that it's a bad group, but just that's where I won't be shocked if by the end of the year we're like, dude, you should have had Miami's room over Texas's room. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. I should have. Or even in their league, you should have had Florida's room over their room. Some things along those lines. Number 8 for me is Oregon. Trev, you said a lot of it. I like Mekhi Hughes. I think he's going to fit that system very well. He'll be running behind a better line. He'll have a pass game that's going to take a lot more pressure off of him. I have no doubt that Mekhi Hughes is going to produce this year at Oregon if he's healthy. And then also with Noah Whittington, good, solid number 2 back. 8 was a tough one for me. I could see Oregon maybe fading back a little bit. I think it's a good room. I think it's going to produce because of the system. I don't know that it's a room that has a lot of room for growth. Other from a production standpoint, it'll or from an effectiveness standpoint, I think they'll get a lot of hype. They'll get a lot of love because it's Oregon, but I just don't see it as a room that is a really high impact group for me. Number 7 is Oklahoma. This is one of the ones that we had differently, Trev. So you had Pitt. I had Oklahoma. I believe this is the only one that we had different. This is the only one that I had in that you did not have in. I really like this Oklahoma room. And the only reason that I have any pause whatsoever about having them in here is because I still don't know how I feel about the Oklahoma offensive line. But as we said, it's about if you put them behind the same line, where would they be? And when I look at this room, guys, I see a backfield that has a lot of talent. And part of this, too, is I'm a huge Jade Knott guy. And I know his numbers last year at Cal were not good. 385 yards, 3.3 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns, 24 catches for 222 yards and a touchdown. On the season at Cal, 140 touches, 607 yards, 4.3 per carry or per touch and 5 touchdowns. And you're thinking, hold on a second. That's the lead running back for the number 7 running back room in the country? Yes. Because if you look at what he did before, he was banged up a lot last year and the Cal running back or the Cal O-line stunk. As a sophomore at Cal, he ran 246 times for 1,315 yards, 5.4 per carry, 12 touchdowns. Into the season with 1,484 total yards, 5.5 per touch, 11 touchdowns. As a true freshman, we remember Notre Dame facing him. 897 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns, had 321 receiving yards, had 1,218 yards, 5.6 per touch, and 11 touchdowns as a freshman at Cal in 2022. He's going to have a better supporting cast around him, and he's going to have a quarterback that does for him what Riley Leonard did for the Notre Dame running backs last year, where you can't just focus on Jade Knott. Otherwise, John Mateer is going to rip you up. But I also like their depth. I think Javante Barnes is a good number 2 running back, averaged 4.7 yards per carry last year behind a really not very good offensive line. And they had 2 really talented freshmen last year that I think are poised to have big jumps this year. That's Xavier Robinson, who Notre Dame fans should remember. Notre Dame offered him late in the process in 2020 in the 2024 class. Big old back out of Oklahoma, ended up going to Oklahoma. Cowboys thought they were going to get him for a while. He ends up picking the rival Sooners. He had 233 yards last year. Taylor Tatum was a big-time 5-star running back coming out of high school. I don't care about that. I care about the talent. I think he's talented. He ran for 278 and 5 yards a carry last year. And they did that behind a pretty bad offensive line. So when you look at the overall production, despite all the struggles, this is a 4-man group that had almost 2,000 yards of offense last year, despite injuries and youth and playing behind bad lines. You put them all together this year with a quarterback that can also do things with his legs. If Jade Knott is healthy, this is a really, really good running back room. And so I really like the Oklahoma room and could see them even being higher. And then my number 6 room is Minnesota. Look, I think Darius Taylor is really good. I get the 4.8 yards per carry, Trev. I talked a little bit about that before when you were frozen. I think a lot of that was coming back from some injuries he was dealing with. Offensive line had some struggles. I think he's a pretty good back. He's a productive back. He's a hammer back. And I thought he's had some really good moments in big games. I remember watching them last year, and I'm going to pull it up here real quick and just to give you the specific numbers. But I can't remember the game it was. But there was a game last year where they lost a game. How was it? Actually, they won a game. But I just remember watching them in the first half of the Penn State game. And he's just a bulldozer against Penn State. And then the second half, they stopped giving him the ball, and lo and behold, Penn State comes back and wins a football game. Then I watched him against Wisconsin last year, just putting the team on his shoulders and just carrying to victory. So, like, the 4.5 per carry in that game isn't great, but that was a cold day, and they won 24-7 because it was an old-school Big Ten football game, man. They said, hey, number 1, we're riding you, baby. We're going to go as far as you can take us in this game. And I thought he played great, and then he ran for over 100 yards against Virginia Tech in the bowl game. And this is a kid who is going into his junior season. So I think that factors into it as well. I think he's really poised for a really big breakout for Minnesota. I think he's going to be a big time player. And you mentioned the pickup of just lost it for a second there. Lost the kid from Marshall, AJ Turner. AJ Turner had 100 yards last year against Virginia Tech. So he's played against Power 5 teams. He's a really shifty back, can catch the ball in the backfield. And then, of course, Cam Davis, I think, will be kind of their third down back. Can pass block, can catch the ball in the backfield. Very underrated room. Very underrated room. I like Minnesota I like Minnesota quite a bit. Number 5 for me is Georgia Tech for all the reasons. Actually, sorry, Trev. It's not all the reasons you've said because now it's your time. See, I took his moment. Oh no.
Well,
I took his moment.
I think
so. We're finishing up with 6-10. That's my bad.
Well, and I think Trevor made a really good point. We were in our text there. Let's snake it back and forth. You guys have the same top 5. Well, and so why don't you go Trevor, you?
We can't really do that. Right. So let's I can move the cards around.
Well,
you got to give me a minute to do that.
Just use Trevor's list. It's the same list.
No, but they're not in the same order, I don't think.
Oh, I thought that they were.
I don't think. Are they in the same order?
They're the exact same.
Let me see here real quick.
I think they're identical.
Vince, we still need to wrap up 6 through 10 because 1 through 5 is going to be another segment. So go ahead and do that. And I'm going to
definitely do that. Okay. So we are halfway through our best rooms from a running back standpoint. And so make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends. And of course, jump on the boards@irishbreakdown.com. Premium message board. Dominoes are falling. You got to be there if you want to see which ones are next and what that looks like. And then, of course, support our new channel, CFB Nation. There's all kinds of good stuff happening over there. And we're trying to grow it, and we're trying to talk more college football as a whole. And that is where we're doing it. So, give us a subscribe over there. Help us grow that channel. And, check out all the different content that we've got going on over there. Lots of good stuff. So make sure you check that out. So CFB Nation, as well as the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Gentlemen, we have come to that moment where we are going to reveal the top 5 running back rooms across the country. And you guys did your list separately, but came up with the same top 5. So the 6 through 10 was a little bit different.
In order. I thought we had a little different order, but it was
they're identical. They are identical. So what we're going to do, we're going to do this one a little bit differently. We're going to snake our way through it.
Well, we're going to both talk about each one.
Right.
Each one.
So who gets to reveal which one is which. How about that? So
I think this will also be a better way to do it in the future also, as opposed to
agreed.
One guy going through 6 through 10. We'll just kind of do it that way in the future, but I think it'll be good.
But it gets us, we'll have some fun with this one, and we'll kind of go back and forth, and you guys will each talk about why you have that team in that slot, and we'll eventually get to our number 1 slot. So
then at the end of that, we'll talk about some other rooms that were under consideration to keep an eye, and some potential breakouts and some different rooms. So it'll be fun. We'll let Trev finish his Michigan conversation later too. So cut off.
I'm always good for a good Michigan rant. But okay, gentlemen. So 5 through 1, we're going to start at the bottom. We're going to work our way up. So here we go with the number 5 team on the list. Georgia Tech. Trevor, why is Georgia Tech the number 5 team on your list?
Yeah, when I break down this running back room, I raved about Jamal Haynes, ranking him. Brian and I both had Jamal Haynes ranked in our top 5 running backs in college football. So I don't want to spend too much more time on him. But when you look at the makeup of this room as a whole, they added another. Ryan brought it up at the start of the show. The transfer portal played a much bigger factor in running back rooms across college football this year than what I even thought about before breaking down some of these lists. Now, I look at who they brought in. They brought in a running back from Pennsylvania, Malachi Hosley, one of those two. I apologize for.
I'm going Hosley.
Okay. Malachi Hosley. He played 444 snaps last season. He has 16 career starts. At Pennsylvania, he had 1,192 rushing yards off of 191 carries, 6.2 yards per attempt. He also added 9 rushing touchdowns. They also bring back Chad Alexander, who was Georgia Tech's 3rd leading rusher last season. 58 attempts, 280 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. Also added a touchdown on the ground. Georgia Tech kind of checks some of the boxes when I look at running back rooms as a whole. They kind of have their star power player in Jamal Haynes. They have a really good rotational back in Malachi Hosley, an 1,100-yard rusher last season, 9 rushing touchdowns to go along with that. Also added 89 yards through the air. And then they also have Chad Alexander kind of rounding out the group. Quality back, somebody that I'm not expecting to take a bunch of carries this upcoming season, especially with those top 2. But I definitely like Georgia Tech as my number 5 room. Brian, why do you have them as your 5th?
Because you need 2 ingredients, in my opinion, to have a top 5 room. Number 1, you need a dude at the top. I do think you need a dude at the top, and they have one in Jamal Haynes. And I think he's going to have a very big season. But then after that, do you have anything beyond him? So if he rushes for 1,200 yards and your next two guys only combined for 300, you may not sniff some other rooms as a whole that are going for 18, 19, 2,000 yards and providing big production. They're probably at the bottom of my top 10, if in my top 10 at all, if they don't get Malachi Hosley in the portal. Now, he's not Jamal Haynes goes down in week 1, they're fine. Like we talk about with Notre Dame and Jadarian Price, which is why the top 2 running back rooms are in sort of I'd say the top 3 running back rooms are sort of in the league of their own, in my personal opinion. But I think with Hosley, you're getting a legit experience back. You mentioned 1,000-yard rusher last season. You watch the film, he's a good player. He lacks elite speed. That's the one thing he lacks, but he's got great vision. He's got very good feet. He fits the system very well. He gives you a legitimate guy that can be a 1 if your 1 goes down. He's not on the same level as your 1. And then Chad Alexander is a good football player as well. And now you can use him in different ways. They also have a young kid that I like named Trelane Maddox that I could see getting more opportunities this year as well for them. So I just really overall like the depth that Georgia Tech brings to their running back room as a whole. But they've got the stud at the top and the depth. And they also have a quarterback that can take some of that pressure off of them as well, which makes it's not why they're here, but it helps them become even more effective by having to go against that. And then my number 4 group, Trev, and it says my name, but we have the same exact 5. It's Texas A&M at 4. And honestly, Trevor, it's similar to my conversation I said earlier. If I knew for a fact that Le'Veon Moss was going to be 100% healthy, they might be higher on my list, because there's a lot of things about this room I like. And like Texas, they're getting a talented player back who missed last season with an injury that's going to help them out. So when I look at them, obviously it starts at the top. It starts at Le'Veon Moss. You and I did it when we did our breakdown at Texas A&M. We talked about he ran for 765 yards and 10 touchdowns last year. It's not going to knock anybody's socks off. He only played 9 games. And in the 9th game, he had 2 carries for 8 yards. So he did almost all that production in 8 games. He was on pace for almost 1,300 yards last year if he just stays on the same path that he was in all year. He was the guy that started to wear Notre Dame down in the 4th quarter of that game, and then they went away from that, which I still don't understand why they did that. And then all of a sudden Notre Dame was able to kind of run away with it. Not that Notre Dame wouldn't have won anyway, but they were leaning on Notre Dame a little bit, and he was a big reason for it. But it's not just him. Amari Daniels comes back, who's a really good number 2 back, good slasher back. He ran for 661 yards last season for Texas A&M. He's a guy that can be a number 1 if you need him to. Not quite. He's not as dominant as what Le'Veon Moss was. And he also was a lot less effective when they didn't have Le'Veon Moss, because his teams could kind of key on him. You know, last couple games of the year against Auburn and Texas, he had 111 yards on 40 carries. That took his yards per carry average down a bit. But he's another good back, guys. Really nice complimentary player to Le'Veon Moss. And then they also get Reuben Owens back. And Reuben Owens is a guy that some people thought was going to challenge for the starting job last year. I didn't necessarily agree with that. I didn't think he was going to be that kind of guy. But he's a good number 2 back also. He's someone as a true freshman, ran for 385 yards, but like we talked about, C.J. Baxter only averaged 3.8 yards per carry. He was a little bit better late in the season, went for 5.2 against Mississippi State, 106 yards, 5.9 per carry against Abilene Christian. And then he did return late last year and played in the last 2 games of the season. He went for 3 carries and 10 yards against Texas, and then had 13 carries for 56 yards in the bowl game against USC. So I don't think Reuben Owens is what some people make him out to be. Like, this guy might push Le'Veon Moss for the starting job, but he's a really good depth player. And so they have a stud at the top, and then they have good depth. And if you want to know what separates Texas A&M and Georgia Tech for me, it's that right there. It's Amari Daniels and Reuben Owens are better, I think quite a bit so, than what Hosley and Chad Alexander are for Georgia Tech. That's really what separates. And now I do have Jamal Haynes ranked higher now, but you understand the asterisk type of aspect to that ranking. If Le'Veon Moss was not injured, he's probably a top 3 or 4 back. And a healthy Le'Veon Moss from last season is probably ranked ahead of Jamal Haynes for me. He is ranked ahead of Jamal Haynes for me, and I'm a big Jamal Haynes fan. So that's why Texas A&M is number 4 for me. I know you have them there too, Trev. What do you like about the Aggies before we move on to number 3?
Yeah, I echo a lot of the same things that you talked about. I really like the production coming back. Here's what separates Texas A&M and Texas for me, because I can understand why some people are like, well, Texas has a guy coming back off of injury, and you guys have them ranked lower in each of our lists. We might not have them ranked as the same spot, but we each don't have them in our top 5. Texas is relying on C.J. Baxter to come in and be that second punch coming off.
If not one, eventually.
Exactly. Whereas Reuben Owens might come in and there's a world where he's the third guy.
Right.
That is ultimately what separates it when I compare Texas A&M and Texas.
And their number 1 is just better. I'm sorry. Le'Veon Moss is better than Wisner. He just is.
Agreed.
He just is a better back.
Agreed.
Their number 1 is better. Their number 2 is better. Their number 3, I give the edge to Texas. I actually think C.J. Baxter is a better running back than Reuben Owens.
Yeah.
And then if you go Owens 2, maybe he's better, than Amari Daniels, maybe. But I still like Texas A&M because their number 1 is better.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Our number 3 overall team on both of our lists is Louisville, the backfield that we already referenced, Isaac Brown. Don't want to spend too much more time on him, but it's also what returns, and it's young talent in Duke Watson and Kawan Brown. Now, Duke Watson, he played in 12 games last season. He had 587 yards on just 67 carries. The kid averaged 8.9 yards per attempt. That leads college football in yards per carry. He also added 7 rushing touchdowns. He also added a receiving touchdowns. But his 8.9 yards per carry led the nation in yards per carry amongst backs with at least 50 rushing attempts. And that's with a guy like Isaac Brown going for 7.1 yards per carry and 1,100 rushing yards. Then you go down to their third guy, Kawan Brown. He played in 11 games last season, 47 attempts, 243 rushing yards, still over 5 yards a carry at 5.2. He added 3 rushing touchdowns on the ground as well. This is a really, really loaded backfield that Louisville has to work with this upcoming season. And so when I look at them, it again checks the boxes. They have a guy at the top in Isaac Brown that has that star power. And I love the Duke Watson, Kawan Brown rotation coming in to kind of relieve him, because you have, at least with Duke Watson, another really explosive running back. So you're not losing the big playability when Isaac Brown isn't on the field.
If anything, you're getting even more home run ability, because
it's almost a similar conversation to what we had last year at one point in time with Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. Jeremiah Love at one point in time was behind Jadarian Price
for
in yards
a
per
good chunk
carry
of the season.
Yeah,
he was. Yes.
Yeah, it's a very similar situation to that. I love Louisville's backfield heading into this season.
Well, and it's nice to have a number 2 back that can make big plays and doesn't need the volume. I mean, Duke Watson ran for 597 yards last year. He only carried the ball 67 times. He averaged 8.9 yards per carry. And like you said, Kawan Brown's a good running back as well. Rushed for 243 and 5.2 per carry. So I also think this group has a lot more pass game potential this season. But if you just talk about, if you're someone who just cares about numbers, these 3 running backs last year went for 2,278 yards, 7.1 yards per play, and 23 touchdowns. That's just the top 3. That doesn't include like what Don Chaney did. Notre Dame's backs in 16 games went for 2,509 yards and 6.8 yards per play, 28 touchdowns. So like this was a outstanding room, and they played well in big games. It wasn't like they just, padded their stats against teams that weren't good, Trev. I mean, they first half of the game, they were making some plays against Notre Dame and against Miami. These kids were making plays. So it's not just the numbers. It's the film is impressive. They've shown that they can kind of take over games. You talk about how many teams can say they had 2 backs that had multiple 100-yard games last season, because Duke Watson went for 104 against Kentucky, 117 against Stanford. And then, of course, Isaac Brown had 5 games of over 100 yards and went for 99 in a bowl game and 93 against Pitt. So, and the other thing too is like when one guy's not playing well, the other guy can kind of step in and perform. Isaac Brown gets banged up against Stanford, only has 3 yards on 2 carries. So what happens? Duke Watson steps in the game, carries the ball 11 times for 117 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like we talk about that a lot with Notre Dame. When you can lose your number 1 back and your number 2 guy can step into the game and perform at a high level, you know, like you're doing something, and you're doing something really impressive. And I love this group. And they were young. They were all freshmen last season.
That's the craziest part is how young that room was, man. Insane talent. Insane.
Number 2 is Penn State. I think this is obvious after the conversation that we had the other day on our Irish Breakdown show where we made the case for Notre Dame being number 1. I love the Louisville room. I think they have a shot to battle against Penn State, but they've got a lot to prove in order to really jump into that number 2 hole. I really like this room. I think the Penn State room is good because they don't use their depth, but they have depth behind their top 2. And here's what I'm saying. Like, we already talked about Nicholas Singleton, one of the 2 to 3 best running backs in college football. And we say, like, well, you can't just look at the best player and say that they're the best room, which we did. Like, the ranking looks like we did, I should say, because we have Notre Dame, Louisville, and Penn State backs as 1, 2, and 3. And then we have, them as the top 3 rooms. But the whole point is each of these teams has a number 2 that is a number 1 for a lot of people in college football. And that's certainly true for Penn State. Nicholas Singleton is a stud. If he doesn't get banged up in the middle of the year, he is their leading rusher. He finished the year last year with over 1,400 yards, 6.9 yards per play, 17 touchdowns. Very talented back. He was a guy that Notre Dame worked hard to try to get out of high school. He ends up going to Penn State. It's a great pickup for them. Katron Allen is one of the best number 2 running backs in college football. The only reason that I believe, and this is just watching a lot of Penn State football, the main reason that I believe, I shouldn't say the only reason, but the main reason I believe he was their leading rusher last year is because Nicholas Singleton was banged up, and they were just trying to make sure they could get him through the year. So some of those games where you needed someone to be more of a volume guy, he was your guy. And he's a good running back playing behind a good offensive line. He had 4 100-yard games last year against Bowling Green, against Illinois, against Oregon. They had both of their backs went for over 100 against Oregon in the Big Ten title game. And then he also went for over 100 against Boise State, played relatively well against Notre Dame. He is a decent weapon out of the backfield, 18 catches for 153 yards, not a big weapon out of the backfield. That's the one thing that separates those two. But that's a really dynamic 1-2 punch. That's an outstanding 1-2 punch for with those 2 guys. And then the other thing too is they had 2 freshman running backs that I like a lot, that if it wasn't for those 2 guys would have produced a lot more. Corey Smith is a kid they got out of Wisconsin. He was a high school teammate of Owen Strebig. He went for 152 yards last year on 22 carries, averaged 6.9 yards per carry. Very talented running back. He was a very good pickup for Penn State. And next year, when these 2 guys are going into the pros, we're going to be talking a lot about Corey Smith and a lot about Cam Wallace and Quentin Martin as they get ready for that group. But I think Corey Smith is the guy that becomes their number 1 when these 2 guys go pro. I like him a lot. His first game he played last year, first time he carried the ball in a game, he was against Washington. He had 5 carries for 95 yards in that game. He's a very good running back. I'm a big Corey Smith guy. So even though they don't use him, I still count him as part of the room of why the room is good, because if they have an injury to one of their top 2, slide Corey Smith or Quentin Martin right into that and you're fine. Just move everybody up a spot and you're good to go. And that's what, to me, separates these rooms that we're talking about, like A&M and Louisville, Penn State, and then our number 1 group, because they go 3-4 deep of guys that could step up and be really good football players for you. And a lot of teams have like one really good one and then a solid number 2, and then their number 3 is just like, okay, we give them a couple carries. These are teams that even the numbers don't always back it up, can legit step in and be difference makers. And that's what I think separates, because it's easy to talk about Katron Allen, who had a great year last year, Nicholas Singleton. I mean, he had 2,000-yard running backs last year. That's outstanding. I don't care how many games you played. That's an outstanding season. And especially when you consider you had a tight end that had over 90 catches and also carried the football a lot of times last year because they would just direct snap to Tyler Warren. These kids still went for over 1,000 yards each. So this is an outstanding running back room. There's no doubt about it. And they are truly the Thunder and Lightning type of 1-2 punch as well. The Thunder is obviously Katron Allen and his 1,100 yards, 5.0 yards per carry. He's a big old kid, power back. And then you've got the home run hitter, Nicholas Singleton. So that's an outstanding 1-2 punch for Penn State. But it's more, you know what I mean? It's more than, and here's another thing Penn State gets credit for in my book. They lost a really good running backs coach to Notre Dame when Jawan Sider left to go to Notre Dame and replaced him with Stan Drayton, who's known as a really good running backs coach. He was the head coach at Temple, got fired as the head coach. They hired him to coach running backs. Great pickup. Like when Notre Dame lost Dylan McCullough, it was, man, you lost a stud. You better replace him with somebody really good. And they did. And then Penn State did the same thing by getting Stan Drayton as the running backs coach. That should help them make a relatively smooth transition from a coaching standpoint as well.
Well, look, man, I mean, Penn State has a running back room that even the team that we have ranked at number 1 can't even say. This duo is going on their 4th year of doing this. I mean, you go back and look what Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen have done over the years. In 2022, they combined for 1,800 yards and 22 rushing touchdowns. In 2023, they combined for about 1,650 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns. And then obviously we know what they did last year as well. This has been a very, very productive and impactful duo for Penn State's backfield for quite some time.
Yeah.
And it's impressive, man. There's no way around it. They are the clear-cut number 2 backfield in the country. And it's for a lot of the reasons that we listed off why there is an argument for them to be number 1. I don't want to completely negate that. I don't have them at number 1. Brian doesn't have them at number 1. But if somebody wants to absolutely pound their fist on the table, I can understand some of the arguments.
We would have a friendly disagreement, but I would not be like, dude, you're nuts. It's not even close. No, I'm like, all right, look, here's my case for why we don't agree. And we made it in our show the other day. But if you're going to sit there, Trev, like you said, and say, no, I definitely think it's Penn State, and here's why, I'm like, well, it's good arguments. I'm not going to tell you you're nuts for thinking that because that's an outstanding room.
Absolutely. But with that being said, it is in our number 1 room in the country because we believe that resides right in South Bend, and that's Notre Dame for a multitude of different reasons. One, they have the most electric running back returning in college football in Jeremiah Love. He is the consensus number 1 running back. I mean, even in some of the rankings in the CBSs of the world, the PFFs of the world that have Penn State above Notre Dame in running back room rankings, they all have Jeremiah Love as the number 1 returning running back in college football. So they check the star power box. But the depth in this room is crazy. And yes, Penn State has the depth in their room as well with guys like Quentin Martin and Corey Smith and Cam Wallace. But if I'm comparing Penn State's 3 through 5, I'm still taking Notre Dame's 3 through 6 every day of the week. When we start talking about Aeneas Williams,
their 3 is better, their 4 is better, their 5 is better. Correct.
Exactly. And I don't even know if Penn State has a 6 in the discussion with Nolan James. And so when you look at the depth of the talent that Notre Dame has in their room, we all know the explosive player that what Jadarian Price is. 6.2 yards per carry, 7 rushing touchdowns. They have Aeneas Williams, who Penn State should be very familiar with. 34 rushing attempts, 219 yards, 6.4 yards per carry as a true freshman. Played in 15 games and became their primary third down running back as a true freshman. And then you have somebody who hasn't really even been unleashed yet in Kedron Young. 5'11", 242 pounds, is going to be that kind of bruiser. I just sit back and think of a day where what's going to happen when Kedron Young gets the Katron Allen volume of carries. It's going to be a rough day for opposing defenses. That's all I have to say. But look, fact of the matter is he played in 30 snaps as a true freshman and carried the football on 21 of them and scored a touchdown on one of those runs as well. You have Jabron Payne coming back, who's your primary third down guy in 2023. And like we talked about the other day, going to be interesting to see where he fits into that rotation. And then rounding out the group, you have a true freshman in Nolan James that in other years, he would have been your number 3, if not number 2 guy.
Yeah, he's playing as a freshman for a lot of teams in the last decade. Like as a number 2, number 3 running back. Yeah.
Yep. And so Notre Dame is the number one team for a lot of the reasons why we listed the other day when we stated our case for them to be the number one running back room in the country. But again, like we've said before, the divide between 1 and 2 right now is a pretty sizable gap. But Louisville is going to make a push. Texas A&M is going to make a push to close that gap this season, no doubt.
The difference for me is I don't know that Le'Veon Moss is going to be good and is going to be the same back. Like, I don't know that he can say I'm as good as the Notre Dame guy or the Penn State guy or the Louisville guy. That's what remains to be seen. He's got to show that he can be healthy. But, yeah, I think there's a gap between the number 1 and 2 teams compared to number 3 and 4. And then I think there's a gap between 3 and 4 and what comes after them. So I think there's a very clear top 4 coming back, and then there's not anybody that I would argue belongs in that top 4 right now with that group. And then I think Notre Dame is number 1. You have the best running back in college football, and you have a guy who's number 2 who could start for a lot of the teams in our top 10. And is honestly someone who belongs at least in the conversation for one of the 10 best running backs in college football. The one thing that hurts Jadarian for why I wouldn't put him in there yet is he's got to show me more in the pass game this year as a blocker and pass catcher. But then you don't need him to do that because you've got Aeneas Williams. And it's not even like with Aeneas, it's not like Corey Smith's production all came, hey, you're walking in mop-up minutes. And Aeneas had some of that production last year. I mean, his 50-something yard touchdown run against Army was mop-up minutes. But his catch and then follow-up run against Penn State was not. They were down 10-3 and he made those plays. And that to me is that game showed us why those are the top 2 running back rooms. Because there were different times where those backs took over games. Penn State's backs took over the first half and just were running on Notre Dame, and Nicholas Singleton had the early long catch and run against Notre Dame. And then the second half, the Notre Dame backs took the game over. And it wasn't just Love and Price, it was also Aeneas Williams. And that's what separates Notre Dame, in my opinion, from all the others is that. But you talk about a Jabron Payne, who was very good 2 years ago. Keedron Young is incredibly talented. Nolan James. They've got star power. They got big-time depth, and they're coached well. They have been coached incredibly well so far. We'll see if Jawan Sider can coach them up. I mean, he coached the number 2 running back room in the country, so I don't think it's going to be that big of a drop-off between what Notre Dame had. But there's just they check all the boxes. Say, well, they didn't run for as many yards as Penn State's guys. That's a usage thing. We broke this down the other day. Notre Dame's top 3 running backs went for 6.9, 6.4, and 6.2 yards per carry. Penn State's top 3 running backs went for 6.9, 6.4, and 5.0. And the guy that had 6.9 had 22 carries. And that was all against mop-up minutes. So their top 2 backs went for 6.4 and 5.0. And so it just, more explosive, more efficient, more dynamic, got to the end zone more. Penn State, for example, their top 3 running backs accounted for 27 touchdowns on 474 touches. Notre Dame's top 3 running backs accounted for 28 touchdowns on 367 total touches. So more than 100 touches for Penn State. They averaged 6.1 yard per touch, 27 touchdowns. Notre Dame on over 100 fewer had 6.8 yards per play and 28 touchdowns. So we talked about this the other day, Trevor. If Notre Dame's backs had the same level of attempts, like total touches, that the Penn State backs had and kept their same yards per touch, they'd have over 3,200 yards. And that includes 4 playoff games where the numbers weren't as good as they could have been because you had not only the injury to Jeremiah Love, but you had injuries to your offensive line. And I think that factors in as well. But there's no doubt these are the top 2 runs and two rooms in college football. And this is a very strong top 4 for sure. A little bit, fuzzier after the top 4. I think there can be some debate about, should Georgia Tech be higher or lower? I think you originally had Georgia Tech a little bit lower and then moved them up before I showed you my list. That's why we are where we are. But that's our top 10. I know we're going to talk about some other rooms, but that's our top 10. And we only had one difference of team, even though we had a lot of different spots, 6 to 10 different.
I know you guys have some teams that you were considering putting into your top 10, or, depending on how it's kind of labeled as sleeper teams. And so teams that, could have gotten into the top 10, or teams you're keeping your eye on to move into the top 10 once the season starts and goes on. So I know you guys want to talk about, the handful of teams that were on the radar to make the top 10, but didn't quite break into the preseason top 10, right?
Trev, who was your first team out? Like if I told you can't have Pitt, Trev, got to get rid of Pitt, who's your next team in?
That's tough because originally when we started off this conversation, when I sent you over my original list, the team that I had in there instead of Pitt was Navy. But after some discussion, a lot around Eli Heidenreich, and their best rusher isn't even a running back on the roster, it's Blake Horvath.
And we kind of decided that Heidenreich is kind of more of a receiver than the traditional slot backs used to be, which is why we went that direction. But that was an interesting discussion.
Yep. So if not for Navy, I was kind of bouncing back and forth between Oklahoma. Baylor was in that discussion for me. I like the guy that they have coming back. I know they have two pretty good running backs coming back, but I think it's the Washington kid that I like from Baylor. So they would be in contention for that number 10 spot for me. So there's a couple in there. Others are a little bit farther away, but off the top of my head, those are probably two of the ones that I kind of danced around with.
Yeah, I like the Miami room also. The Miami room was in the conversation for me. They don't have the proven production. That's the thing that hurt them a little bit. Their top two backs that are coming back this year had just over 1,000 yards. They did average 6.1 yards per carry. They had 13 touchdowns. Didn't produce a lot in the pass game. They did add Shamar Brown from North Dakota State, but my thing with him is he ran for 1,100 yards last year and 15 touchdowns, which is impressive. But he averaged 4.8 yards per carry at the FCS level. I know they play a tough schedule, but I need to see him perform against sort of the best of the best, which is obviously the Division I level. But I need to see more from him before I'm going to fully jump on board of him being a great addition to this room, and that's kind of part of it. I mean, we saw him play against Colorado last year, who is not exactly the epitome of a great run defense, and he ran for 33 yards on 9 carries. So I'm kind of skewed by watching him in that game.
Yeah.
And being like, okay, how good is he really? And that might be a little bit unfair, but I do really like their 1-2 punch. I think it's a very good duo, and they're going to be able to replace Damian Martinez quite well. They were a group that I looked at. And I'll tell you, speaking of sleeper groups, the Big Ten has a couple that I like. We Indiana's could have a really sneaky good room, but a room that I couldn't put in here because of the lack of proven production is Michigan. And I also don't know who Michigan's 3 is. That hurt them as well. But their 1-2 could end up being really good when you look at, obviously, Justice Haynes, who I'm very high on. Justice Haynes. Trev, you and I have talked about this in multiple shows at Irish Breakdown. That was one of the best sneaky under-the-radar portal pickups for anybody in college football last year, and Justice Haynes, getting him from Alabama. And then Jordan Marshall was a top 100 caliber running back coming out of high school that picked Michigan, who had a knee injury last year. He's healthy, had a great spring. They're a sleeper room to keep an eye on, but the lack of production just kind of kept them from being in that conversation for me. And there's a couple rooms in the Big 12 that I looked at too, Trevor. And Kansas State's got an interesting room that I could see them being a top 10 unit by the end of the year. Obviously, we know about Dylan Edwards. He had 546 yards last year on 5 touchdowns, is the number 2 back behind DJ Giddens. He averaged 7 yards per carry. They had Joe Jackson, who was a young running back last year too. He had 227 yards and a touchdown, 5.8 yards per carry. Gabe Irvin transfers in. He's been kind of all over the place. He didn't do a whole lot last year. Nice depth player, but they got an FCS transfer from Southeast Louisiana that if he is as good as I think he can be, and I have a harder time projecting the FCS guys, but he could have the impact for K-State like Malachi Hosley had for Georgia Tech, where he could kind of step into that role and be that. The difference is with Georgia Tech is they already had a proven established 1 Kansas State doesn't. Dylan Edwards was an outstanding number 2 last year, but can Dylan Edwards at his size be a number 1? That's going to be a key. But we've only seen Dylan Edwards be a number 1 in one game, Trevor. That's it, just one game. But the reason that I had a hard time keeping them out is because in that one game, which was a bowl game last year, he went for 196 yards and 18 touchdowns against Rutgers. First time all season he carried the ball more than 10 times a game. And he went for over, almost 200 yards. And they have a quarterback that can kind of take some of the burden off him. But between Joe Jackson and Antonio Martin, that 1-2 punch behind him, K-State could end up having a really good running back room by the end of the year. I just need to see it. That's what kept him off of it for me, Trev, is the same thing with Miami. There's a lot of rooms like that, man, this room could end up being really good. And then there's another one that I had a tough time with. There's 3 in the SEC that I really like, Trev. Florida's got 2 really good young backs coming back, Jaden Ball and Jacoby Jackson. They also have Trey and Webb on their team, but Jaden Ball and Jackson rushed for a little over 11 or a little under 1,200 yards last year, had 14 touchdowns, both over 5 yards a carry. I just need to see them take their game to another level. They're both really good number 2 backs. Can any of them step up and be a number 1 back? That's a question mark. I like that room. I think LSU, if I had more faith in LSU's offensive line, and the other thing is, like, Caleb Jackson has not done it for me yet. I just don't love what I see. If he can have a breakout year as the number 2, he could help, or even number 3, because they got a freshman coming in Harlem Berry that is really good. And Caden Durham, obviously, is a good player too. Those are some of the ones that I looked at, Trev. And there's one more SEC team I want to talk about if you don't. But I just realized I went through a bunch of teams, and I want to make sure that I leave you some room to talk about a couple of the rooms that you like as well.
No, you're good, man. The thing that was tough for me when I put together this list, a lot of the teams that were close, like, I think they have decent production. Like, I think about the Miami room. I love Justice Haynes going to Michigan, but I think compared to the top 10, they lack that guy at the top.
Proven guy,
I love Justice Haynes, that move going to Michigan. Am I going to take him over, like a Jamal Haynes? No, I'm not.
Right.
Mark Fletcher, Jordan Lyle, I think that's a good 1-2 punch at Miami. Do I think that that's a better 1-2 punch at, like a Texas? I think it's comparable, but I think I'm still going to take Texas's.
Right.
And so that's what kind of left some of those teams off of some of mine.
And then like the one team that doesn't have that proven number 1 in our top 10 is Georgia. Mm-hmm. But the difference with Georgia is they're more proven at 1, 2, and 3, or 1. And they're just as proven at 1 and 2, but their 3 to me is better than some of these other teams. And that's what kind of separated that a little bit for me also is. And I just think as an individual player, I just think Nate Frazier's a potential stud. And I just think he's a better player than some of those guys.
Well, and that's what's so weird about Georgia is because they're like one of the few teams that you look at in terms of like a good season at Georgia is not the 1,200 yard season. Georgia hasn't had an 1,000-yard back in a minute, but a good season for them because they distribute the ball so much is kind of that like 700 to 900 range, and that's very much in the realm of possibility for Nate Frazier. I mean, he almost did that last year and he only started 3 games.
I could see him being their next 1,000-yard back.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it at all.
I could see that.
Yeah,
I could see that. Like, I could see him having a year 2 jump if the line plays better. But to your point, Trev, they haven't had a 1,000-yard running back since 2019 and DeAndre Swift.
Yep. So I evaluate them a little bit differently than I would another running back room having like that stud guy. It's more of kind of, you go back, you watch the film, who's that go-to person or go-to people that they have. You think of DeAndre Swift, you think of the Nick Chubb, Sony Michel duo. So plays a little bit of a factor as well. But you and I had some very similar, like, sleeper teams almost made it in. And so who's you said you had another
No, I know. Tennessee is my unit. is that I look at. Like, they got to prove it. I don't know that these guys can do it, but when I watched their backups last year, there's some talent there. I remember Peyton Lewis coming out of high school. He was a guy that I liked out of Virginia. I think Deshaun Bishop's got some talent. Bishop went for 455 and 6.2 per carry last year, and Peyton Lewis went for 339 and 5.3. They also got Star Thomas out of the portal. He had 871 yards at Duke last year. So that's another guy. So that's a room that I'm like, okay, they're not in there now, but that's one I'm like, let's see how that group goes. Let's see how that group is able to develop and perform behind a new look offensive line. But that's another one I have to have in my own. And here's the one G5 other than Navy that I'm looking at. Don't sleep on the backfield at James Madison. They've got a really interesting situation. They had a kid that transferred in last year from North Carolina who had a very good year for them. George Pettaway, he's from my area, played at, I think he played at Nansemond, Suffolk. But he transferred to James Madison, and in his first year at James Madison last year, had a pretty good season. He went for 162 yards, 980 yards per carry, 980 yards total, 6.1 per carry, 5 touchdowns as a sophomore. Joby Mallory comes back. He averaged 6 yards a carry. Wayne Knight comes back. He averaged 5.8 yards a carry. And then they also had a kid transfer in from, I think it's North Texas, who was hurt he transferred in last year from North Texas, and he was expected to be the starter. His name's Ayo Adai. In 2023 at North Texas, he rushed for 1,017 yards and had 7.1 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns at North Texas, and went for 807 the year before that and 7.2 yards per carry. And then as a freshman at North Texas, went for 496 and 5.9 yards per carry. So that is a deep, without question, in my opinion, the best G5 running back room in the country next year, and could be one that you're going to look at and say, y'all should have given them more consideration for a top 10 overall group.
All right. I think that's going to do it for our preview of the top 10 running back rooms in college football. So these guys did a lot of work to put these lists together. Really appreciate you guys breaking it down for everybody and kind of giving everybody a taste of what's out there in college football, and not just Notre Dame and their opponents. And so that was a great list that you guys put together. Really appreciate that. Should be a lot of fun. We've got other lists and things like that coming down the pike throughout the rest of the summer. So you're going to want to stay locked in, not only to the Irish Breakdown podcast, and then of course our CFB Nation site as well, because there's going to be a lot of college football based lists and shows and things like that moving forward. So you want to stay locked into Irish Breakdown for all that good stuff. And so, of course, you want to jump onto the boards at boards@irishbreakdown.com for our premium message board. And then, of course, also irishbreakdown.com for written content and great stories and insights there. And, of course, hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, and share with your family and friends. Share it with your enemies, too. It's good. You just want to get it out there, get the word across. So share with everybody that you know. We'd really appreciate that. And it doesn't cost you a dime. So we appreciate the effort, folks. And this is one big happy family, and we're glad that you're a part of it. And so IB Nation Sports Talk is coming up in a few minutes. So you want to check out that. I believe there is an interview pending with Carter Carls, who follows Texas A&M. So you're going to want to check that out. And then, of course, I believe Jesse and Sean will have rapid fire following that. So IB Nation Sports Talk in a little bit. And we will be back tomorrow. And everybody knows what tomorrow is. It's Friday. It means it's the Friday free-for-all mailbag. And so myself, Brian, Trevor, we'll all be there. And so we appreciate you guys hanging out with us for today. So until then, we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.